What is the sad truth about smart people? A constant feeling of failure. Like, you're aware you could do good with such an effective brain, but you also always feel like you aren't living up to your true potential. Then there's fear about never reaching your full potential, and dying a failure point also. It's pretty lonely tbh. I don't know how much of that is compounded by also being autistic in my case, but I find it hard to keep friends. Because I have a habit of fact sharing and come across like a know-it-all. People tend to get pretty bored of every conversation being like a lesson in one thing or another. It's also kinda hard to date as an intelligent woman. A lot of men feel insecure around you. It sounds obnoxious, but I don't mean it to. I've been more intelligent than most men I have dated. That seems a novelty when first dating. Kind of a manic pixie thing, but they soon get fed up with dating a know-it-all. Oh, and also, burnout. Again, I don't know how much is autism in play, but holy fuck, I burn out so quickly. My brain hyperfocuses on something new daily. I have no choice as to what it is, and I can't stop researching it until my brain is satisfied. Often, I go so intense that I burn out. Literally spend hours every day researching and learning. It's my biggest hobby. The intensity of the focus on it, combined with the inability to stop and focus on something else, means I hit burnout pretty quick. Smart people can get outpaced by hard workers because they can easily burn out. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. A lot of smart people really face a harsh reality when they make the transition from high school to college. If you're smart, gifted even, you're able to pretty much coast through even app level courses and get a good score on the SAT/ACT. Life has a lot of structure. Teachers tell you when the homework is due, and things really can't go wrong because the schoolwork just comes naturally. Enter college. No one tells you when your homework is due. You're outside of your parents' house and no adults are there to baby you to make sure you do your homework and keep up with your assignments. The due dates are longer and span months instead of days. It's easy to get left behind if you don't put pen to paper and knowingly prioritize things. I've watched so many people in my life go from literally 4.0 plus GPAs, above 30 score on the ACT, top of their high school classes, straight to either flunking out, dropping out, or being on academic probation. Because their background, everything came easy for them. But it doesn't matter how smart you are at the end of the day if you don't apply it in the right way at the right time. The saddest part of being smart is that most of the time, you are surrounded by relative idiots. I'm serious. When you see how the vast mainstream average millions of people are just led blindly by programming via culture, social conditioning and propaganda, it can turn you into a cynic. What's the point of having a democracy, for example, when out of hundreds of millions of potential candidates, absolute brilliant options out there, and then society chooses not a scientist or a statesman or social leader, but a failed reality TV show host who was born rich, never had a real job before becoming president, multiple severe personality issues, and the intelligence of an 14-year-old boy, and the crowds of millions think of him as a good leader? When you are more intelligent than most, let me tell you, you don't have the same motivations as the average person who apparently believes they are successful when they work 40 hours a week or more to some corporation that is paying them as little as possible while working you as hard as possible. I don't know how any could work a job, giving almost all of their awake time, the entire production of their life, to run some hamster wheel that will make some foreign billionaire a couple more cents he won't even notice. I don't understand how the vast majority of people have the will to live for others but not themselves, and if I was of average intelligence, I suppose I would not even look at it the same way. TLDR, geniuses are alienated. To be a genius is to be surrounded by dumbass, and it's depressing, because dumbass lucky enough to be in the top 0.0001% of wealth run the show and intelligence doesn't come into that much point. You are more likely to be wealthy in our system. If you have no empathy and have sociopathy, you are even more likely to become rich than if you have a high intelligence. I'm smart. Not on a genius level. Just smart. My sad truth is that I left school at 15. I couldn't comprehend how this was going to be the rest of my life. Kindergarten, school, college, work, Death point. I fell into a deep depression for a few years while just learning whatever interested me. Point. I now am in the possession of extremely niche knowledge about things most people don't care about and are not willing to pay money for. I taught myself to code and am a swell now. Point. The sad truth about it is, while I usually enjoy what I do, I can't for the life of me stop asking one question. Why? I can't let it go. Always why? In a circle that's never ending. Feels like my mind is in a bugged loop without a break condition. Point. I feel like there is a threshold for people either being not smart enough to ask why or being smart enough to inherently know that questioning everything doesn't get you anywhere. I'm in the middle of those thresholds, stuck forever, burning out on trying to understand and never going to get the answers I'm looking for and not being able to accept not knowing. Point. I just feel empty. The more I push for truth and knowledge, the faster I burn out. If I stop to push, I fear that I might just surrender altogether and might as well not exist. Personal perspective, but being used was the worst. Everyone wanted to be my friend when the group projects came out. Come over to our house, Trogda, we can work on the project and then play games. But the second the project was over, they didn't want me coming over anymore. From elementary school through middle school it was a struggle. High school not so bad, because I got put into all the app courses and we didn't have very many group projects. My brother skipped a few grades, but had a really bad experience with it, and ended up getting held back. It was a maturity thing, not so much intelligence thing, so my parents didn't want me to skip any grades for fear that I'd have the same struggles. The other thing is not learning how to study. I basically never had to study until my 3 to 4,000 level chemical classes in college. So when I got into med school, I had zero study skills or clues about my learning style and struggled hard my first year. Never failed. In fact, I never made below a B. 79.57 rounds up yo. But I felt so inadequate because I was in the bottom 1/6 of my class. I just had a kid, and while I hope he grows up to be smart and enjoy education, the first thing I'm going to do is help him learn how to study. That way, even if he is a genius, he'll not have to go through the struggles I did if he wants to pursue a similar level of education. My father, when he was alive, would absolutely be described by everyone who knew him as the smartest man they've ever met. He just thought differently than anyone else. He would prefer to breeze through incredibly difficult texts in math, science, history, and philosophy than have a sit-down conversation with a human. He was very adventurous and traveled the world on his own, joining science explorations like tagging penguins in the Arctic or going a film crew to view chimps in the wild. Engineering was his favorite though, and his career. My brother, who has a PhD from a top school in engineering and has a math equation named after him and basically only works with other geniuses, once described my dad as a once-in-a-lifetime mind point, but socially he was arrogant, awkward, not particularly nice. I think he covered up his insecurities with alcoholism. He loved us best he could, but it wasn't a usual sort of love, I think. I didn't quite inherit my dad's abilities, but am incredibly social. He was pretty proud that he raised a popular girl though, haha. He would always tell me I'm smart in that way, a way he couldn't be. Point. Anyway, after his death, we were discussing him and had all come to the separate conclusion that he possibly had some sort of autism. I'd describe him best as Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. Rip daddy, you smart son of a gun. Typically, intelligence goes one of three directions. People have a unreasonably high expectation for you that due to human limitations and the way the world works you can never live up to, so it usually leads to a crash and burn or a shut. Lot of people who have above average intelligence find it hard to be emotionally aware and typically have a struggle with faith if they are religious, usually leading them to depression and seclusion and creating a disconnect with family and friends. In more rare cases, people are able to live up to their full potential and the rest of society tends to distance themselves from these people who they now treat different based on income, intelligence, and appearance. Humanity becomes significantly more judgmental out of jealousy and typically aren't aware of it. It becomes near impossible to relate. Point. When you have high intelligence, the best thing to do is typically try not to stand out and act stupider than you are. Restrict commentary, especially on controversial subjects, and keep closed up. You will never live up to your full potential, but in my personal opinion as a pessimist we will all die one day, so the important thing is what makes you, and the people you care about happy. Never feel pressured to push yourself, if it's not something you find any form of enjoyment from. I'm not saying move out and start doing art on a street corner, I'm saying find reasonable compromises that give you happiness, but don't screw your whole life up. If you want to work in the music industry, but you're like me, and can't play a guitar for the life of you even after 5 years, then try working with audio editing software, amps, studio setup, designs, create instruments. Whatever you're good at that fits into that field. The expectations that are most important are your own. In both high school and college, everyone universally thought of me as the smartest person they knew. Not necessarily because I was great at science or math, I was, but as a person with great clarity of thought, ability to articulate complex thoughts, high emotional intelligence, a solid moral code with a logical and fair approach to right and wrong point. I think it's accurate to say each and every one of my close friends from that time has surpassed me in terms of career progress and wealth. People don't directly talk about it, but I can sense that they all have this lingering "what went wrong with this dude, we thought he'd be an overachiever and leave us all in the dust" vibe. Point. They still treat me with incredible respect and still describe me as smartest dude I've ever known, but it can sometimes get to me, just being alone with my thoughts and wondering why I missed the bus to claim my McMansion, Audi R8, and fulfilling career where I can work remotely while actually partying in some other country. At least in my case, being told I was some kind of child prodigy all my life didn't teach me hard work and the hunger, the drive to actually improve my skills and set goals and actually do the work to achieve them. I became way too jaded, disillusioned and bitter with life way too early. Point. I did do decently well for myself, but definitely not what everyone thought I'd be. I'm a 60k guy, while everyone thought I'd be a 250k guy by now. I have met many people that reminded me of me. One of my direct reports was a guy I describe as smartest dude I ever met, and he was a dropout from an ultra prestigious tech school. Absolutely brilliant guy, but a chronic underachiever and master of self-sabotage. I got along with him best the 5 years I was his supervisor, because I got him, and he got me. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. This probably reads like it's coming from a pompous dude describing himself as smart, but I assure you, I'm often described as an extremely down-to-earth and humble person. I can think of 3 things I ran into as a former gifted kid. Reasoning intelligence doesn't necessarily apply to social things, and being ahead on the first doesn't mean you're ahead on the second. I'd argue I was behind, but it's hard to say. There are lots of things to learn. If academics are coming easy, that will challenge a kid and help them grow. There will come at some point a wall which can only be cleared by having the ability to work hard. For me, it was my freshman year in college and discovering I couldn't just float through life on being able to do the math in my head cost me an academic scholarship. I learned a lot that year. Among the things I learned are the following: 2A. Go to class and take notes. 2B. Do the homework, even if it isn't for your grade, because it helps you learn. 2C. Bad ideas are bad ideas, no matter what excuses, justifications, or rationalizations you give yourself. 3. The idea of potential is meaningless without all the pieces that go into making it happen. And if you're missing even one of those pieces, you won't meet that potential, and a lot of people will get upset about it. Look at it like climbing a set of stairs. Claim what's within your reach and continue reaching and accumulating and mastering and solidifying until you achieve your aim. Nobody human can climb an entire set of stairs all at once. You might be able to climb them 2 at a time, or even 3 if you've got long legs, and you might be able to leap down 10 stairs at a time, but nobody climbs up 10 stairs at a time. That's 6 things sneakily crammed into a space that claimed to have 3. Planning ahead, as you might guess, wasn't one of my strengths, and neither was being willing or able to admit I was wrong. They often don't get help because they are seen as fully capable, and it completely sucks. I'm the smart one in my family. I'm 19. Had to move to Toronto or university this year, and I was effectively thrown into adulthood without any guides or support because my younger siblings needed more. Parents said. I found the apartment downtown by myself. I traveled by train, signed the lease, set everything up. Paying for rent and uni by my own money. Moved in on my own. Point this last year, the apartment has had a minor fire. Not my unit, thank gods, bedbugs, mice, some legal issues about the tenancy agreement, and I'm dealing with it all myself. Asked for parents' advice, and they said I was being unfair to not handle it alone because they have all their stuff. I can't even drive. I'm a first year university student trying to keep a 90 average in STEM, and that alone is hell. I can't even buy booze or weed. Just because I'm smart enough to be thrown into the deep end of adulting without help and not sink doesn't mean I appreciate it. Not one bit. This is on top of severe unmedicated ADHD, social anxiety, depression, and insomnia. The current strategy is to power through. Sucks that I know hyper-independence is a trauma response too, but it ain't. Like I can explain that to parents. Meanwhile, younger sibling, seemingly more stupid who has bad grades, got his entire culinary school tuition and residence in another province fully funded by parents, because he needs help, and I don't point it at hard to relate to peers. It's hard to feel happy. It's hard to manage mental illnesses without help. It's really lonely. Point parents, if you ever end up with a hella smart kid, don't lessen your affection because you think they are mature. Support them the same. I promise they'll be able to go further with your help, not despite it. Many smart people are hated for being smart. Point I worked at a company where my manager decided that people from one particular country were superior to everyone else. What the superior people took 1 month to finish, I took 1 week. My manager was angry. He thought it was impossible that someone could be 4 times faster than the superior people. So he kept falsely accusing me of having defects in my work product. Then there's the movie Charlie with Cliff Robertson. Charlie is a mentally challenged man and works cleaning the floors at some company. He is enrolled in an experimental program to increase his IQ. It eventually turns him into a super genius, but it's not all at once. He gradually gets smarter. At one point in his job, he figures out how to do a task in 15 minutes that someone else took 3 days to figure out. Some of the other workers become resentful and start sabotaging his work. They eventually fire Charlie, blaming him for disrupting the company. When he was mentally challenged and spent his time mopping the floors, everyone liked him. As soon as he became smarter than everyone else, they attacked him. Point that's pretty much life for smart people. You have to hide your intelligence if you don't want to be attacked. Either that or isolate yourself with other smart people, maybe in a company like Google or Apple. All the studies I've seen show an increase in intelligence and you have an increase in depression/mental health issues. How? This can be masked by more intelligent people having better coping mechanisms with their mental health issues. Like the average person with psychopathic thought processes is not Hannibal Lecter. They are actually of below average intelligence. The small percentage of people with psychopathic tendencies who are above average intelligence do pretty well, in the clinical sense, able to maintain relationships, stable employment, acceptable personal hygiene, etc. So they get less professional mental health care help. I'm by no means a big brain, but I'm a little above average. I test just below clinical levels of psychopathic behavior/thought processes, but rather than because I'm so smart, my coping mechanisms were just dumb luck. My abuser was my mom as a kid, and I was so unhappy with the lack of fairness in that relationship that I rebelled by making sure I was very fair in my interactions with others, which makes it tough to be abusive or predatory towards others. I'm good at sales, but I swapped to a more trade/artistic field, where I have less pressure to be antisocial/manipulative. I married a very kind lady who is non-religious, but was raised very real Christian as I think of it, bringing home homeless people off the street to help them get back on their feet, that kind of thing. So I have daily good modeling of healthy social behavior. Just those 2 coping mechanisms have been critical for me having a happy life. I have one dear friend whose brain works a lot like me. She was kinda drawn to sales too, because she was rewarded for being good at it. She did well enough in real estate that she is almost cruising on the passive income in her 30s, and her happiness increases. She has had less need to do sales daily. Had been fun to watch. I'm excited to see what she does with herself when she doesn't have to be reinforced daily with the sales techniques encouraging manipulation. Intelligence actually has several domains to it. For example, spatial, emotional, linguistic, or even musical intelligence. A person who is smart is not a master of all. Every person has their own journey and set of skills. The same can be said for struggles. Common struggles could be anger/frustration/jealousy/entitlement. Being gifted does not mean the person will be adequately hired, promoted, or celebrated for his or her skill set. Careers often hire for the sake of helping a friend, emotional intelligence, or charisma. Who is best for the team instead of who is best. It is not uncommon for someone who is highly gifted to work as the subordinate of the CEO's irresponsible son or daughter. Loneliness/low self-esteem. Being gifted often means people listening to you speak and not contributing to the conversation. Not all people who are gifted are trying to brag about their intelligence. Some just want to have a conversation about things they are passionate about. Adding to that, they are usually passionate about subject matters they are skilled in. This leads to one-sided conversations where the gifted individual doesn't learn anything new. This impacts relationships. The individual may worry whether or not he or she has been talking too much. The individual may feel isolated or out of place. Over time, the individual will probably gain the skills to be more diverse in conversation, but that doesn't mean his or her initial passions will be shared. Point depression. To quote Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. A gifted individual may feel he or she is not fulfilling his or her role in society. He or she has a gift that isn't being used. In another scenario, the gifted individual may actually feel pushed to pursue something that isn't their passion. Maybe the genius doesn't want to become a doctor or an engineer. Maybe he or she has always wanted to own a skateboard shop. What about the gifted individual who holds too much pride or defines a large part of their identity in being the best? He or she may feel defeated when meeting someone more skilled. Point feeling of powerless or weight of responsibility. Imagine being in a scenario where the wrong move could get you or your relations injured or killed. The gifted individual may be skilled at keeping calm during an emergency situation, but his or her peers may be escalating the danger in the moment. Being a genius doesn't mean you can control the people around you, nor that they will be receptive to your feedback. It can be stressful and lead to all sorts of questioning. Point normal challenges. A scientific mastermind can still be late to the party because she forgot where she put her keys. It's too easy to mistake IQ intelligence for the ability to navigate life effectively and successfully make something of oneself that one can be proud of and feel good about. IQ intelligence is good, but it's only one thing. You need a mix of things to be successful in life. There are other qualities like people skills, emotional intelligence, organizational skills, leadership skills, creativity and innovation, risk-taking, adaptability, work ethic, persistence, toughness, and others. There are people with unremarkable intelligence who have higher levels of these other things that can greatly outperform some intelligent person who thinks that they can rely purely on their intelligence. Point in the end, this can be the difference between a wonderful and high-flying and satisfying life and a frustrating one that never really takes off. Point we overvalue IQ in that way. We essentially train people in youth to think that intelligence is the thing that is going to determine who does well in life and who doesn't. It can mean that the higher IQ person gets out into the real world and stands around waiting to be ushered to the front of the line as they always were during formal schooling. But the real world does not operate on grades and gold stars, and no one is coming to do that ushering. Point meanwhile, the people who never expected that are out there hustling and getting it done and rising. You can get some confused and sad high IQ people out there who don't get it. Maybe not so smart after all. That there's no such thing as smart or dumb people. There are people who are taught good communication skills as children, and those who are not. Point there is a tiny percentage of people who have some preternatural ability at math or memory skills, etc. But in general society, those who are seen as intelligent usually just have the linguistic tools to quickly comprehend and relate complex ideas in simple language. Constant reinforcement of their superiority gives them the confidence to develop this further and appears as even greater intelligence. Point meanwhile, those who lack the linguistic tools end up feeling embarrassed or underperform in school and lose confidence, forcing them to achieve less and less. As an illustration, I speak a couple of other languages fairly well. In English I come across as fairly intelligent and can broadly discuss any topic with great fluency. In my other languages I can't do this as easily, and I get frustrated at not being able to communicate freely, so I start to retreat into myself, and my vocabulary contracts. So even though I know I'm smart enough to engage, I'm unable to do so. An easy way to demonstrate this is to talk to someone who is stupid and get onto a subject they really like and feel comfortable with. They will talk with far more fluency and sound much more intelligent than on other subjects. All of this comes from childhood and how we are socialized with others, how much reading and writing and performing is encouraged, and how we help kids deal with setbacks. And frankly, it's terrifying to think how many perfectly normal people think they are stupid because they didn't get this. And not necessarily because they had bad parents or bad childhoods, just that the useful tools weren't recognized or made available. I see a lot of you here, and I feel a lot less alone reading a lot of your stories. That being said, I spent all of my teen being looked as a gifted child. Unfortunately, my parents had me when they were 21 and 19, so I didn't have the smoothest experience growing up. Elementary school was cool for the most part, except the part where my dad was physically and emotionally abusive. Getting belted by my dad wasn't the most fun thing, and was worse because he would make sure my mom didn't know at the time. Sometime during those years my blood parents divorced. My dad left off back to New Jersey, where he was born and raised, because my mom was cheating on him. I got to stay with my mom's side. My mom was very ignorant to the idea that I could be problematic. As such, she would be calm when I wasn't doing anything wrong, but then 180 into rage form if I actually happened to do something wrong. Middle/junior high school was getting worse as I started to become more aware of myself and other people. Turns out my family was told by the schools I had been going to that I was gifted, but sadly my family didn't really know what to do with that information and just imagined I would be able to do great things and then assumed their imaginations were completely true just because I was able to prove a shred of their imaginations to them. This led a lot of the other kids in my family, who was now my blood parents, seeing other people, yet both ends were still around. My dad came back from New Jersey to constantly rush me into doing great things for them, and the pressure tore me apart over time. Reaching high school, what I was mentally unsound accelerated into becoming emotionally volatile as my dad was no longer physically abusive and mentally abusive, but now emotionally abusive. Everyone started calling me mentally ill for being socially inept. But come on, if people knew how my parents treated me, you would have known why. Any fits of anger and frustration or any attempt to finally talk about my emotional feelings after years of being afraid to open up was followed by, "Hey Justin, are you off your meds again?" or some other shit. Eventually, maybe junior year, I made a suicide attempt and my family showed genuine concern. After that was over, it was back to everyone going through the motion of supporting me. That suicide attempt was the only one I'll ever make. When I looked back on it years later, college, hooray, I guess. First 2 years were a dumpster fire, but after that everyone moved on from me. I'm finally 21 and all of a sudden the bullshit stops. It was a whole slew of emotions. Furious because now I'm being taken seriously all of a sudden, just because of a number. Depressed because I was there now with no really clue what to do, because my family didn't really know what to do with me either. Also, I realized I never really had friends beyond physical. No one in my life made me feel any genuine connection and understanding mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, but in a way that is difficult to explain as what I was gifted in is something I still hold indescribably close to myself to this day. Afraid because I was in world that I realized doesn't really have the power to perceive my gifts on a surface level, so much so that I scare people with them due to them not being able to understand my capabilities in any way, shape, or form. Happiness? I was able to actually start feeling a sizable amount of it because people finally left me the fuck alone, so I was able to do things I loved. I'm still left alone here at age 26. Yes, the loneliness does cripple me from time to time. But hey, better to be alone than to put up with people who don't give two shits about me, the people who just wanted to use me for my gifts. This is me. I'm just naturally smarter than many people I come in contact with. Straight A's through school and graduated with honors. I went on to earn an AS, BS, manuscript, and PhD, also all with honors, which taking advanced courses because standard courses bored me. Everyone sends me their papers to review, and after I review them, they always ace them. I've helped people take tests. I can do ridiculous math problems in my head. I naturally see numbers in my mind when working problems out. I can remember basically any number. I have 5 children, and remember all of their SSNs. I also know my wife's, my parents', and my siblings' SSNs. I can remember the house number of every address that I have ever lived. I say all of that to answer your question. Let me tell you, it is a curse. My people skills are severely lacking. I struggle to deal with people of lesser intelligence, not because I want to treat them differently, but because even the simplest of conversations with them just makes my head pound. I can't fathom that they are not able to handle the simplest of tasks, and the subject they choose to discuss just bore me to death. It is there is no stimulation. The problem is that my children seem to be just as intelligent, so they are literally the only people that I can really tolerate speaking with. My oldest son graduated high school a semester early with honors and went to live in Japan for a year, then returned to earn his AS and BS. My oldest daughter graduated high school a full year early with honors and has earned an AS, BS, and manuscript. My second daughter graduated high school a full year early with honors and has earned an AS and is working on her BS. My second son is a high school junior, but walked just last night as he has earned an AS1 in high school and will graduate high school next year with honors and more than half of his BS already completed. He will only have 1 year of college after high school before earning his BS. My youngest daughter starts kindergarten this year, but is just super smart already. Her vocabulary is astounding, and she is already learning a second language. My wife has her AS, and is working on her BS, and just takes college courses for fun and stimulation. I share all of that, because all of my children are just like me. They struggle to hold a regular conversation with anyone, have very few friends, and don't like their coworkers, but they are excelling at everything they do. So again, it is truly a curse. I have been tested at a decently high IQ on multiple occasions, high enough to be in the upper 10%, and have an above average memory. All my life schools put me in the advanced classes and some of the highest scores for state testing. Family and teachers always praised me for being so smart, and honestly it kinda blows. I developed sheet study skills because I always assumed my memory would be enough, and I was a very lazy student because I viewed homework and classwork as beneath me and as busy work. Test scores and group projects were as, but anything else was a 0 or missing altogether. My work ethic was sheet because I felt entitled to a good future because I was smart. Slept through my ACT for an easy 26, no calculator. Slept through my ASVAB for a cool 85. I did what I wanted when I wanted and wouldn't listen to the more experienced individuals in my life. I was very impulsive. Well, then life hits you like a brick. I had a kid right out of high school, and it gave me the kick in the ears I needed to get my sheet together. I got a trade job. Working with my hands helps keep my thoughts quiet. I personally went to all the teachers I could still find and apologized for my immaturity and attitude. My fiancée, on the other hand, and mother of my child, was the opposite. She was never in the advanced classes, she scored average test scores, and she has ADHD, so she really struggles to focus for long periods of time. She does, however, have amazing work ethic and drive. She studied every night for hours because I didn't come naturally to her, and honestly she's going to be more successful for it. She has an inquisitive mind and asks many clarifying questions because she can swallow her pride to educate herself. All I can really say is I think that a work ethic is more important than naturally acquired gifts, and honestly those gifts can become a handicap if everyone in your life reinforces that you don't have to try. Lonely and depressed. In my case, point was in the GATE, gifted and talented education program in elementary school in the US. Went on to a middle school with no such program, but was awarded a greatest potential prize, $1,000, when I graduated high school. Looking back, it seems like some of my teachers could tell I wanted to be doing more than I was there, but didn't have resources to engage me. I never graduated high school. I tested out when my vice principal pulled my father and I into a meeting to explain he shouldn't be here and he should drop out. I don't even think I'm even all that much smarter than average. Sure, I pick things up easier than a lot of people, but the more I learn, the more depressing the world is to me. But I just can't not learn. When I don't understand something immediately it feels like a challenge, so I figure it out. Then I'm sad I did. This mostly applies to social dynamics and systems. But math at higher levels fits in here as well. Without the resources or infrastructure necessary to engage above average minds, it can be a burden rather than a benefit. My parents split 2 years after having me, a few months after having my sisters. Mom kept the kids and worked full time while getting her degree to improve herself. We were very much latchkey kids. My father convinced me to move in with him in middle school by playing to my masculine instincts that weren't being developed. Then he proceeded to crashes and my life into his post-Vietnam War heroin addiction. He got by in life on his salesmanship and social abilities. I've always had a knack for getting people to trust me, but have never been willing to put that to work for myself like dad did, because mom raised me hard with the golden rule in mind. And I'm glad she did. Long story short, too late, I don't connect well with people anymore, and I don't keep jobs for more than a couple of years before I get bored and self-sabotage. I'll learn all there is and get frustrated that I'm not advancing faster, unwilling to even sell myself for promotions. Ignorance really does seem like bliss to me. I think for me, it's more of feeling like I have to continuously prove myself, prove that I'm smart, prove that I deserve the spots I have due to my intelligence, prove myself to peers, prove myself to higher ups, and I'm conscious of all the stares. That's not to say that people who aren't smart don't care about what other people think, but I think that a lot of smart people can't help but always think about who's judging them. I also think there is a lot of fear, which is why proving yourself is so often connected with smart people. The fear that I will fail the people who believe in me, fear that I failed myself, the fear of rejection due to me being a failure. Personally for me, I try to think that those fears don't bother me and that they shouldn't. Like I'm on a floating rock traveling through the vast universe and nothing seems to matter in the grand scheme of things, and yet here I'm being afraid that I can't live up to the expectations of me being book smart and how I should have a high job that matches my smarts when all I want to do is laze around and have fun. Like objectively, I know these are all just man-made concepts and I shouldn't be so scared of what others think of me, but my stupid brain makes me feel emotions. I feel the fear of rejection and disappointing others, even when I don't want to. Being is smart just means that I know this is all useless and that realistically I don't have to do anything or prove anything to anyone, but I keep doing it to please my brain and myself. Intelligence equals success. Al Capone was arguably the most famous gangster of the Prohibition era, and compared to a lot of people during the era he would be considered enormously successful. He was also a violent and syphilitic idiot. He died with the brain capacity of a 12-year-old child. H.P. Lovecraft is most widely recognized for his creation of the cosmic horror genre of horror/science fiction writing, which has had an undeniable influence on basically all future literature and media in those respective genres. His ability to instill words on the page with the basic fears humans feel when approaching the unknown is considered legendary. He also died penniless because his works were never really all that popular during his lifetime, after his wife left him. Of course, the point is that life has myriad reasons why someone with what is considered above average intelligence would have less success compared to someone stupider than them. But something sort of interesting, but mostly depressing, is that society tends to perpetuate the idea that all successful people are intelligent people. This is manifestly incorrect. Maybe the stupid person's family is rich and has connections to get them a stable job. Maybe the intelligent person's family is poor and has nothing to get them ahead in life. Maybe the stupid person is just really charismatic and likable and nobody can find an issue with them. Maybe the intelligent person is just really awkward and unlikable and everyone wants them to just go away. Maybe the stupid person is handsome/beautiful and has the social grace to find a partner to share their lives with. Maybe the intelligent person is a bit too average looking and is too shy to find someone who would love them beyond the veneer of physical appearance. Maybe the stupid person has had little to no traumatic events that have occurred in their lives to prevent them from reaching what is considered to be the average level of success. Maybe the intelligent person has been beaten down with tragedy after tragedy and is never able to catch their breath. It's depressing, but until we as a species are able to individually value a human being for what they are extraordinarily gifted at, there will be billions of people living and dying in complete obscurity because their talents lie somewhere beyond their current circumstances and personal situation. Becoming disconnected from people in some way. This could be getting extra work because you're the smart kid, or possibly having more people rely on you when you do not know what you are doing through their assumptions. You sometimes get put in a role that separates you from others. Sometimes it is the loss of understanding, like not understanding action of others. Sometimes it is the fact that you cannot see how someone got to a point that you think should have been obvious. Other times, it's not just the loss of understanding in your environment or the separation from others. It can be just purely getting too much pressure and stress. Sometimes you just want to not have those stresses from people around you and the environment you are in. It can be soul crushing and leads to most commonly burnout. But what's the worst that could come of this? Suicide. Sometimes it's not losing your life. It should be losing the ability to control your own life. That's what is so damn scary. You can try too much and lose yourself to everything. Having extra of anything can throw off a balance. That includes intelligence. Here is something I truly mean. Sometimes it's better to be ignorant. Sometimes ignorance will cost you your life, but knowing too much is much more dangerous. The more things you find, the more you see about this world, the easier it is to lose yourself. We may not know it or really recognize it, but you are part of this world. Maybe not one day, but right now you should be. Once this world starts to crack, all the pieces that make up the world start to crack too. Some pieces may never see the crack, but when they do it's already too late. The pieces either hold out and don't crack, or they too become a part of the problem. You know what I wonder though? Who is patching up those cracks? I would say those people are heroes. You can ignore my rambling. I'm just saying nonsense. Intelligence is an odd concept to me. IQ tests are the measuring stick for intelligence, but these tests are often implicitly biased to score higher for certain types of educated intelligence. People tell me I'm smart, but it's hard to even know what the difference is between our cognitive processes. I think what it means to truly be smart is not to be some trope of an isolated genius with poor social skills, but rather to embody the basic concepts that humans evolved to increase their collective success. For instance, self-awareness. Many animals' intelligences are based on whether or not they are aware of the self in the way that humans are. It's a given that humans understand that they are a more or less unique individual, but many people lack a basic sense of self-awareness. They act in ways that don't take into account others or the future. People are inherently irrational because rationality does not equal intelligence. It can correspond to it surely, but when someone behaves in a way that's considerate to others and takes initiative to deal with problems, this indicates to me that they are thinking about the future impacts of the actions they take today. Human intelligence is embodied in a few different ways. I would say the most important of which is emotional intelligence. You can be some hotshot math whiz or evolutionary scientist, but if you're an asshole then you're not behaving intelligently. Humans succeed as a collective, not as individuals. Western culture emphasizes individuality, which has led to worsening outcomes for the collective. If you can't anticipate how others will feel as a result of the actions you take, you're not highly intelligent. To behave intelligently, I believe that you need to have a broad understanding of what processes are set in motion as the result of actions taken in the moment. And I think that is the crux of what makes highly intelligent people unhappy. They understand the impacts of the actions others take, and the unpredictability of the actions taken by the majority leads to stress. If you know someone is consistently going to take action that causes detrimental downstream impacts or not take action that would cause beneficial downstream impacts, it starts to eat away at you. Intelligence is not determined at birth. elementary, middle, or high school point. It is not determined by a standardized test point. It is not determined by acceptance/denial into an Ivy League school point. Anyone can be book smart. You can absolutely teach yourself how to memorize chapters, vocabulary, and to a degree math problems/solutions. You can test out at a really high score and immediately forget all of it. Your intelligence is determined by you. What you study, what you do, what you enjoy, and what you do to improve yourself. Unfortunately, truly smart people tend to keep their intelligence to themselves. Society has embraced willful ignorance as the default setting when something isn't working out, and intelligent people focus on problem solving/solutions. Intelligent people are often pushed to the back of the room or kept out of conversations because they are a know-it-all, or always think they are right. Intelligent people are often isolated emotionally, even when with a spouse or family members. Depression, anxiety, perfectionism, procrastination, and avoidance are common themes in their lives, and it is a daily struggle. Intelligence is not an all-encompassing label. You can be a genius at physics, and also be too stupid to tie your own shoes. Excelling in one area does not mean you will excel in all areas. If you know someone who is smart, engage with them, and try to learn from them. Learn how they do things, and develop some of their better habits. Most intelligent people have trimmed the fat out of their daily routines, especially with work, so that they are more efficient, and have more free time. Many downsides to being unusually smart. Things are never aimed at your level, and often move so slow they are boring. You usually have to hold yourself back from doing your best so others can have a go, which makes it difficult to be challenged. You feel immense pressure to choose paths that will fulfill your potential, rather than doing what makes you happy. You are especially isolated as you have just as many struggles as others, but they are not the same ones. It is often assumed that you are equally gifted in all areas, so may not get the support and assistance you need, especially in school. You have to constantly be aware of not making yourself a target of jealousy, and not making friends/people in general feel bad. So you can never just openly celebrate your happy moments with others. For instance, I worked really hard and got ridiculously high marks on the medical entrance exam. Best moment of my life. But I have never told any of my friends as it might make them feel bad, and don't want to feel like bragging. You can have the same issues as others when it comes to motivation, concentration, etc. Especially since I have ADHD, but your struggles are overlooked/minimized, or you are viewed as especially lazy. That is, expectations are higher. Even though being smart doesn't necessarily mean you are just going to do better in every situation. I'm sure there are many others that I can't think of right now. The world is not built to handle and nurture them, either by pushing them to the point of breaking and burning out, understimulating them to the point of boredom, and then troublemaking, punishing them for thinking, being, acting, or working different, or where they can leeching off them, by locking all the best ways of nurturing them behind paywalls. Depression and anxiety tends to be higher among them due to this, which could end up as suicide or other self-harm and addiction. Add in ND issues like ADHD or ASD, and those that are twice exceptional have an even harder time. Then once in the real world they deal with jealousy, the pot crab mentality, the that just the way we do thing around here mentality, having to watch the world pull itself apart when they can see and know there are better solutions, imposter syndrome, the Dunning-Kruger effect, all ends up beating and wearing them down to the point of depression, anxiety, self-harm, addiction. If they manage to avoid some of this, they have to deal with people who don't understand them, or find little or no challenge in life. They become secluded, introverted as they can't find someone to talk to. And once again, if they are neurodivers, all these issues are compounded. They more often than not tend to end up alone/isolated, depressed, burnt out, wondering what the hell is wrong with them. The world will use them for as long and as hard as it can, then chew them up and spit them out. This is the sad truth about smart people. Our society is so complex and so technical that people with the intelligence to deal with and master complexity are assumed to be fitter and more valuable than other kind of people almost without thinking about it. If you divide human intelligence into fifths, a questionable thing to do, since intelligence is hardly a single quantity. People in the top fifth are the most sought after, most revered, most successful, and socially seen as most valuable. But where does that leave the other 4/5? Early Christianity had the concept that every soul was equal in the eyes of God. Your station in life didn't matter. The soul of a peasant was just as valuable to God as the soul of a king or a priest. Now, practicing what you preach is a challenge for any faith, and there were a lot of problems with Christianity as practiced through most of European history. But this concept, the value of the soul, gave everyone a place in creation, a place in the hierarchy of merit. No matter how lowly your earthly station, if tended to your soul and lived a righteous life, you were seen to have value both in the eyes of men and God. And it was something everyone, was capable of doing. Point in the West, we threw that away. Now the measure of social value is intelligence and the ability to make money, which is largely correlated. Our social attitude has become basically, if you're not smart and or rich, you can go pound sand. That's a lot of people being told they have no value, no rightful place in the grand scheme of things. And I think that's sad. A lot of these comments refer to children being told they are gifted, but fail to acknowledge that the education systems in place aren't exactly research based to begin with, and that a lot of motivation for schools is to retain or improve funding. People also fail to mention rates of development. Just because you were in gifted classes as a child doesn't mean you were on the trajectory to being a genius. You could be ahead to 7th grade and taper back when puberty hits an 8th point. It's a flawed metric to begin measuring yourself against your peers. When I first saw this post's title, I thought, who could think they're qualified to generalize truths about smart people? Likely someone with an inflated sense of their own genius, or the many people who feel they never reached their potential and cold bean something more. The sad truth about smart people is probably much more relatable to the average individual than the self-proclaimed smart folks think. Point: the sad truth about smart people is that the things that happen in their lives that reinforce the idea that they are capable tend to fall apart spectacularly in the face of anxiety and depression. Not because they are more susceptible, but because everyone is equally unprepared by their society to face it when it rears its head. There are different ways to be smart, and a smart person is often more a specialist in one way, unusually strong in a certain area at the cost of being unusually weak in some other area, rather than a well-rounded average person. G. Someone may have a brilliant mind for visualizing problems or systems and finding solutions, but have to cope with a terrible memory. Or they are gifted with recollection / making connections to come up with new solutions. But their social skills are low. They can't explain their ideas to the people who could sponsor or fund them, or don't do the networking needed to promote the idea, and their talent doesn't have the impact it could have. Similar thing goes for creative people. People who are excellent musicians or writers / directors, where being creative is their strength, they are often eccentric, or just plain weird in other ways. I've often heard people say that money goes to people's heads and makes them crazy, but I think the reality is if you're creative, you're not just going to be creative musically and normal in every other way, but instead you're going to be creative or have uncommon viewpoints on just about everything. The money is just an enabler and the fame is just a spotlight. And yes, I see creativity as one way of being smart. So I think most smart people have a burden that comes as a cost of whatever it is they are unusually good at, that thing that makes them appear smart. But not all of them. I don't claim to be smart, but a lot of people would say I am. But I overanalyze everything. Very big underachiever despite having big predicted grades. Second guessing is nature. Seeing outcomes months ahead of time is also not nice. Constantly feeling like you're wasting away because you're stuck in your own head, unable to get out. My brain doesn't switch off. It's really difficult. Struggling with your failures knowing you're capable of so much more also makes it incredibly difficult to cope. I'm academically smart, but I'm a complete moron when it comes to normal things, which makes me feel incapable, and then I'm wondering why can't I do this when X person can. Stress management is also harder when you're constantly thinking about what can go wrong. I'm academically smart, I've always been, but I've failed in most other aspects of life once I got my qualifications, because I constantly doubt myself despite knowing I'm capable. The self-awareness is pretty bad. I'm also aware of other people, so I always take into consideration them. I've always thought it would be easier to cut those around me down for personal gain, but can't bring myself to do it, because I feel like I'd be a monster. Kinda trapped in a weird state in life, where I know to succeed I've to basically cut everyone else down around me. I'm just not willing to do it. I'm failing my potential. I know it. I cannot stop it either. It's really unfortunate, but here I'm writing this, still wondering if I'm even intelligent, or did everyone make me believe I was, etc. Someone not understanding what I'm talking about. Since they don't understand it, I must be wrong. Hence I'm an idiot. So often I hear, how would you even know that? There's no way. That can't be right. Even if they admit they know nothing about whatever it is. And on the flip, the complete shock over how I say a thing. Whoa, you're actually pretty smart. Which is just annoying, cause it just means it's something they agree with me on. Calling me smart is just them saying I'm smart for coming to the same conclusion they did. Where the sad truth comes into play, I'll very often say nothing, or have to dumb down my part in a convo. Which is terrible. I hate the idea of treating people like they are not clever enough to understand me, but I more hate that people think I'm not clever enough to be taken seriously. I can very quickly though tell if someone thinks they are the smartest person in the room, and the person who actually is. The person who actually is loves hearing something they don't understand or know, and will want to hear more to absorb more knowledge. Speaking to someone like that is exciting, and listening to their thoughts and knowledge is exciting, cause it's coming from a place of actual interest, not proving something. The know-it-all who feels no one has anything to offer, or treats anything they don't understand as wrong or stupid. They are exhausting, and it's an effort to dumb things down, to hold a conversation with them. The irony. One's knowledge is a tiny island in the sea of all possible information. The shoreline is one's awareness of what is unknown. The more you know, the more you realize that you don't know. This has several effects. Your ability to be certain about something diminishes greatly, and you realize virtually everything you know can, and most likely will, be altered by new information. Your ability to relate to people who express 100% confidence in their positions diminishes, because, as you gain more and more knowledge, everything, and I mean everything, changes over time. People can see you as arrogant if you are able to clearly and concisely explain your current understanding of something, particularly if your explanation invalidates one of their strongly held positions. Conversely, people can see you as wishy-washy if you suddenly adopt a different, or even opposite, understanding of something based on new information. Them, what? Aren't you the guy who said something? You, yes, but new information has come to light. Them, sheesh, pick a lane, buddy. To quotes capture things beautifully for me. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Socrates, Bill and Ted, that's sus, dude. 1500 years ago everybody knew the earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the earth was flat, and 15 minutes ago, you knew that humans were alone on this planet. Imagine what you'll know tomorrow. K. From Men in Black. I was born in the 70s. Grew up in the 80s. Graduated in the 90s. I was one of the wonderkind kids, or at least had that reputation. All of the math and science made lots of sense to me, and I excelled. I ended up leaving regular high school, and went to a boarding school in my state for math and science gifted students. My school was about 5 hours away from my home, so I'd get to go home about once a month. I loved being around other kids who had the same ease of academia as I did. Where I grew up, I was seen as an oddity or a museum piece. At the boarding school, I was just average, which was a very nice change point. Now that we've all been graduated for 26 or so years, it's neat to see where all of these uber smart people went in life. A chunk went into the typical fields, high-level doctors, engineers, and professors. My best buddy at boarding school is now a professor at Berkeley. Physics, I believe. We don't keep in touch very often anymore, unfortunately, so I don't know exactly. Most people just averaged out. They live in the suburbs, have 2.3 kids and a dog, and they go out for Olive Garden every Thursday night. There's nothing at all wrong with this lifestyle. It's a very comfortable life most would dream of having. I, Personally, created a business in a field I had no experience in, and ended up succeeding. I've been operating for 12 years, and am in the process of selling it. I'll have a paid off house and car here in a couple of months. I'm going into business consulting once I clear the sale. So if anyone wants to start a business, hit me up. The final chunk of people, about equal to the doctors and professors, are people who flip their finger to society and are living in a shack in the mountains or on the beach. Seriously, the smartest dude I knew, he was insanely smart without even breaking a sweat, now lives in a shack on the beach and plays music at his favorite bar every night to make his money. He has long hair, rugged face, and looks skinny AF. Dude looks happy as can be. I think the sad truth about most smart people is that they just end up becoming average. The thing that made them unique and special growing up spreads out over time until they are like everyone else. The older you get, you learn there are other fields of work/study people can be geniuses in, and your math and your science knowledge fails to take you very far in the real world. I'd be stuck at home if my mechanic didn't know so much about how an engine's electrical system works. His genius makes my life easy. What does being able to easily do differential equations bring to the world? Genius is just a tool, nothing else. It's what you do with that tool that really matters. You could be the smartest person who ever lived, but if you aren't using it to bring value to something, it's a waste. The r/I am very smart posts are kids who very well may be smart, but they think intelligence is the end goal. You're smart. Okay, now what? The truly smart ones are the ones who can take their intellect and brandish it to create something spectacular. Even the averaged out smart types who live in the suburbs have interests and hobbies that just blow me away. Wanna be smart? Find your genius and use it. Everyone has a genius, you just have to find yours. There's different ways to gauge intelligence. I like to use the word knowledgeable for some of my friends who have PhDs in mostly nature, environment, and social science based fields. Anyways, with that said, the above people rarely get involved with politics or political outreach or initiatives. Over the last decade or so, it seems like the political landscape compared to the expert/scientists gap has widened. With that said, I don't believe this is the fault of these knowledgeable people. It's mostly due to these far-right/billionaire/status quo funded think tanks trying to politicize everything in order to get non-critically thinking nut jobs all angry to convince them to be on their side. Unfortunately, as a result, these academics/knowledgeable people should strongly consider getting more involved politically. I know current politics suck, as these academics generally prefer to surround themselves with other academics. I know I would, if I was a part of that community. It's far more enjoyable to feed off of your equal counterparts to better yourself. But these environmentalist, ecologist, and sociologists experts need to get into the trenches and help move society forward in a progressive way. There's definitely some of them that do, and the ones that do, get involved heavily, but we need more. Just the burden of being one. I might go on a rant, so forgive me for this, but even if you were the tiniest bit of smart in the past, people will expect you to act the same way. This isn't r/confessions or one of those subreddits, but I just wanna say, I procrastinate and don't listen much to my teachers, unlike how I was back then in my childhood. I liked being in the limelight before, and I feel so proud whenever someone calls me for being smart. But it made me selfish, egotistical, and the type of person to lie about a huge deal so casually. And while it's only a part of millions of reasons why I'm not who I was before, it's a particularly bigger reason than others. I noticed that and wanted to change, but the only way I could think of changing was to be dumb. And while eventually math was becoming a challenge for me, it's not like I can be instantly dumb in other subjects. So I got addicted to video games, but I couldn't change to being kind and selfless. I was still the same. But now I got addicted to playing video games, and I just can't stop. It's a habit now, and in the recent years of the pandemic, I just stopped listening to my teachers and procrastinate. Sure, I did some of my work, but a lot of them were either late or not done at all. And my mom says that, since I could be a smart, medalist student that could balance video games and academics, and my dad saying to put in more effort, I just wish I could rant and say these things to my parents, but I'm just too scared to tell them these. They will either tell me to toughen up and punish me, or they will freak out and monitor me under a microscope. But it's not that simple. I still get good grades enough to pass, but I feel like it's just my teachers being nice. There's this one teacher though, math teacher, he just keeps reminding me to keep finishing this and that, but I can't. The work just keeps piling on. But even if I tried, math just doesn't compute in my brain anymore. I wish I could be one of my past friends. He is now in a government science school with tough math stuff and other extra subjects. I just want to rant on and on and on, but I got more school work to do. Point to anyone who reads all of this. I just want to say thank you for reading my rant. Point to any people like me. Maybe it's not too late to give up. Point to anyone who didn't read this because they either don't have time or have a very short attention span. I still wish you a blessed day/noon/night/dusk/dawn. There is no statement that's universally true about smart people, except that they're smart. It's not like there's some huge cosmic trade-off. Some people are just smarter than others. In some ways, that makes them better able to do certain things or figure stuff out. In most ways, however, they're just people like everyone else. Point replace the word smart with any other adjective and you have the same situation. Dumb people are also people, sexy people are also people, and generous people are also people. Point individual smart people can be wonderful, horrible, or anything in between. Some wear glasses, suffer from allergies, and enjoy Magic the Gathering. Others are introverts who spend time in their science lab trying to cure cancer. Others are goodies, influencers, garbage, woe, men, or beer snobs. I recommend focusing on the individual instead of the group. Get to know your local smart person. Don't look for reasons to feel sorry for them because of some sad truth you found on Reddit. You might like them, you might hate them, or you might decide to ignore them completely. But you can rest easy knowledge ng that you judge the person as opposed to basing your decision on some stereotype or assumed group level characteristic that may or may not apply to that particular smart person. I'll try to answer this without veering into r/I am very smart territory. I fall into I guess what would be considered traditionally smart. I tested really well in schools and just in general pick up new skills and knowledge really quickly. Point in school I was frequently bored. I did essay questions and tests, but blew off homework most of the time because it made me frustrated and I just didn't have patience for it. I felt frequently isolated from my classmates and teachers as well. I did have friends, but it was a small group. Point I went to college with high expectations of being challenged and a part of academia, and was ultimately really disappointed. Being impatient is a general character flaw of my younger years, and it showed here. I just couldn't make it through the entry-level classes. They weren't engaging or interesting. I also had no idea what I wanted to do. Counselors had recommended stuff like doctor and lawyer. When you excel, they tend to just recommend whatever is seen as successful to you because they don't know what will actually fit you. I became really disenfranchised with the whole education system and life in general, became extremely depressed and dropped out of college entirely. For a lot of years after that I just tried to cope with depression and worked dead-end jobs. I generally did well at my job, but was never promoted. There seems to be a general fear in retail that if someone in an entry-level position is too promising or motivated that they must be gunning for your job, or just a general assumption that anyone working that kind of job is stupid. I was really bitter and angry at the world during this time, and after torching relationships with my family, incredibly lonely. Finally, many years later I met my wife and started the long climb to try to improve myself. I'm in it now, which I really enjoy thanks to a natural affinity for it and the fact that if you have skills you don't always need education to do okay at it. I'm in a much healthier mental state and mended a lot of relationships. The long and the short, though, is that there's no universal sad truth or truth at all about any kind of person. My opinion is that being intelligent makes it maybe a bit easier to be isolated and harder to find your calling, but that's also from the perspective of someone with severe flaws. Even now, there are smart people who are driven, successful, and popular throughout their lives, I'm sure. Smart, intelligent, educated. Smarts is your ability to make good decisions. Intelligence is your ability to problem solve. Point education is what you've been taught. You can teach someone problem solving skills or to make better decisions. You can have a doctorate and be a total dumbass. You can make very good decisions, but not be able to think your way out of a paper bag. You can be a world-class plumber fixing insane issues after having dropped out of high school. You can be a great well-respected engineer solving all your company's problems and invest your life savings in a game at $300 share only to lose your house, your wife, your wife's boyfriend and her kids. They're all independent traits. I'd also add that education and smarts at least are not universal. You can have a doctorate in business, but that isn't going to help you know anything about how our engine works, for example. Higher education doesn't matter except for its very specific field, where it matters very much. And while someone can be smart when it comes to say not doing drugs, maybe they're a dumb, as when it comes to relationships. Of course, they can work together. I can use my education about something to help me come up with a solution to an issue relating to it. I can then realize the consequences and decide whether or not going through with the solution is a good idea or not. When I was a freshman in high school, the school thought I had issues and made my parents take me to testing at some program for kids with learning disabilities. Well, after my intake assessment, my lowest score was in English, which I tested at a junior level. We went back to the school with the results, showing that academically, I should be a junior/senior and my dysfunction was just boredom. The school responded by putting me in app classes. I flunked those 2 5 hours per class of meaningless homework I refused to do, hour-long lectures about a topic I understood and learned in 10 minutes. I got no help with SATs or getting into college from any source. I took my SAT-2s by accident, Ivy League testing, and scored in the top third of the country with just skating by in high school common courses. I didn't go to college. Well, here I'm 36 years old, working mindless office jobs my whole life, struggling to get by because I don't have a piece of paper saying I went to college. Then there's the social aspect. This is a completely different dysfunction. To keep it short, in order to have a social life, I pretty much need to turn off my brain in society, so I relate to people easier and on their level. You actually meet a lot of secretly smart people this way though, and you actuality are rather popular, because in reality you're being very manipulative by meeting each person on their individual level. Then you start seeing the patterns in people's behaviors. You start to see through the bullshit almost immediately, and of course, like everyone else, you've been hurt before by friends, family, lovers, so you start using these behavioral patterns, even minuscule ones, as reasons to seclude yourself from these people. But hey, at least you're not ever taken off guard when someone stabs you in the back or cheats on you because you saw it coming from a mile away. I always say, knowledge is power, but ignorance is bliss. A lot of things. They usually end up being a social, not by choice but by circumstance. Often isolated because of their inherent unfair advantage, but even without that they find it hard to keep conversation with other people. It's hard to keep yourself amused when you grasp things much earlier than others, and it feels repetitive and redundant to keep talking. Even if they are not isolated by others, they eventually end up subconsciously keeping themselves away from casual talk and by extension, company. Expectations also quite frequently turns them into miserable failures. Not just from others, but from themselves as well. Being smart does not necessitate being competent, enterprising, insightful. However, above others, smart people usually cannot grasp this, thinking they can think of a way to compensate for their shortcomings. More often than not, this does not go as desired, and what follows is a crushing defeat, failure, and depression. Smart people are also significantly harder to mentally/psychologically cure. Since being smart universally is considered as a gift, it is harder for smart people to acknowledge their mental issues. Even if they seek treatment, it is really easy for them to mislead and or confuse themselves or their consultant. Regardless of how professional or experienced you are, complicating an issue by misinformation and misinterpretation can downright drive it impossible. P.S. In essence, being born smart is a huge gamble that one is forced to play during the course of their life. There's usually no middle ground. You have a very small chance of succeeding and standing out in life. Might be anything: an artist, scientist, politician, an entrepreneur etc. as a really prominent figure, reaching a status no normal human can ever achieve in their lifetime, or you have a huge risk of being an antisocial, miserable, depressed failure. 2 things. English is my third language, so please excuse me on some spelling or grammatical error. 1 point: when they were kids, they can outsmart everything, but that means they never learn how to learn something. It's just brought intelligent of a naturally smart child, and when they grow up, these genius came across something different, more complicated or unfamiliar concept. They didn't have the mindset or experience to study, so they failed. When they grow up, and because all their life they grow up thinking they are smart, can do anything better than average kid, these failures will crush them. I'm kinda like one of these kind of kid. I can read a book by myself when I was 4 and remember almost everything I'm interested, can read a page in short time if needed, and I crush to the ground when I reached high school. It do a toll on my mental health. And eventually we find the problem. I'm autistic, Asperger, with learning difficulty on non-physical concept, so I can't understand any math class after middle school. Always got lost, and is terrible at remember human faces, and all other things are just my autistic brain happens to be good at these things our cram school require. So here's the second thing too. Good memorization does not equal intelligence. A person can recite a algebra textbook doesn't mean they understand any of that. I score well on standardized tests. I spent 9 years in college at least part-time studying biochem, it, accounting, and electrical engineering. My current role is as a full-stack developer. I can justify that I'm more intelligent than most people. That doesn't exclude me from making poor decisions in fact, or according to other people's standards. What I mean by other people's standards is that I make $12 an hour at my local library in an attempt to be active in my community. I would be there helping for free if I were allowed. People think that decision is dumb. But praise me for coaching soccer for free. People have some odd positions on situations. From my perspective it is lonely sometimes. I'm attractive enough and I score dates on the regular, but I don't make deep connections. I feel sorry for my ex-wife of a decade. She never really knew me. Maybe someone else could have been genuinely more loving. Maybe is something broken in me that I don't know how to fix. Faking great in bed. I not only know the names of the nerve bundles in the vagina, but also their approximate locations, and I keep fit. Still feel alone even with loved ones and people all around me. Just being around people that miss the point. Borders are important. Still, at the end of the day, immigrants are human beings born on the other side of an imaginary line in the dirt. I'm a human being born with imaginary lines in the dirt around me. I want immigrants to be treated the way I want treated. Bazillionaires have stolen wages from their employees. Companies run in a way that their workforce lives impoverished is untenable to me. People that justify this way of life are a cancer on our society. Struggle to make ideas materialize. I spend so much time on bullshit. I spend a great amount of time learning and tinkering. I spend more time at my job and laundry and spans of time with my kids. That is not quality time or significant. Point being to maximize time that is quality time with the kids. I bounce between not enough time and not enough money. But I can do it solo, except time or money. The sad truth is there is no such thing as smart people. Every one of us is better at one thing over the other, and these things do not stay static, because we evolve along with our environment. People usually connect smartness to being good at whatever society deems as complicated at the moment. So let's say quantum physics as an example. Whomever is really great at it might be rubbish in something else. Also, they could one day take a different direction altogether. Another myth is kinder to us. Our brains learn all our lives, and it is bollocks that as you are older, you stop being able to learn new things. As we age, we just get buried under piles of stress and general loaf stuff. Plus we like stability, hence most folks do not seek new things. The most amusing myth about smart people is that IQ measures anything. It does not, unless you want data on how well people fancy those tests in different environments. The official version is to do it with a specialist team present to monitor and analyze your progress versus however else you'd take it. Some might do better, some might do worse, and some would just walk out because bored. As you may guess, I took those because I was a tester for tests for local behavioral development center who just taken up working with Mensa. Generally, back then, Polish official agencies did that, and my mum, who had been a tax inspector, at one point had to do their tests for some qualification. I liked tests but preferred surveys. Somehow, I got some ridiculous score on it, while being very unsmart in any subject they measured. I simply did loads before. That center's director got obsessed by it though, and I only am mentioning it because she keeps talking about it to my relatives, few decades after the fact. Obviously, I do not like these anymore if even I'm good at them. In summary, we are all sad, smart people. What does smart even mean? Good at test taking? Quick at math? Natural with language? Or music? Or nimble and deft and powerful physically? I think the sad truth is the asymmetry of it. You get really good at one thing and it's far too easy to focus on what you're good at and let the rest of your life atrophy. And in the short term that feels good, but in the long run it bites you in the ass. I was a good test taker, and when I entered medical school I recall the first or second day the class psychiatrist addressing us all. You are all so bright. You've always been near the top of your class. You've never really had to work. Now, you are surrounded by similar people, and by simple math half of you will be in the bottom half. You are going to work harder than you ever have. Typically many of you take it hard. You've never been in the bottom half. We are here for you. It was emotional for most of us. I've two kids. One is a good test taker, I mean 99% in all domains in the standardized testing at school, and the other a math/logic whiz who has been beating me at cribbage and chess since he was about 7 years old. The difficult truth of raising them is working to making certain that they are also responsible and reliable friends to peers. Decent about cleaning up after themselves, engaged in the arts, being good with their grandparents. Sometimes it feels as though those basic parenting goals are harder when those canny kiddos try to bargain for more time playing chess, or think they get some kind of pass because their grades are good. I must keep them well rounded. I have no interest in raising some sort of lopsided superstar. I would prefer a possibly stunted, well-rounded member of society. I'm someone most people would say is very intellectually gifted. For me it's several things. Point: the isolation. The higher intelligence you are, the more difficult and frustrating it is to interact with others. For example, the conversations people of average intelligence want to have vs people of higher intelligence are very different. I stopped talking about the things I'm passionate about because even talking to my mom I could tell she didn't really care and got bored of it. The unhappiness. There's a quote by Ernest Hemingway that I like. Happiness in intelligent people is the rarest thing I know. Point: feeling like the only thing you have to offer is intelligence. The only compliment I've ever really gotten is about my intelligence. Of course it's nice to be considered intelligent, but after it being the only thing you ever hear about yourself in a positive way it gets depressing. Like, is that all I'm good for? Is that all I have to offer? Expectations being placed on you to live up to arbitrary standards set usually by people who don't understand what high intelligence is. All intelligent kids are pretty much set up to fail, and I think gifted kids should be classified as special needs in a classroom setting. They should all be given extra attention, extra structure, especially with studying, and encouragement of work ethic. I would done a lot better had I had those things. I'll probably add on to /edit this later, but I'm too tired to think about this anymore right now. They often don't know what they want in life, which eventually can cause them to hit a wall. Hard point: I was blessed to be able to attend a very good private high school. I was surrounded by incredibly bright and talented people who didn't feel isolated as they were amongst peers. I was smart, but not that top echelon of classmates who went on to be accepted into every top 10 college in the US. Our class valedictorian was a normal guy still. Wicked smart, driven, and consistent. Everything he did was to be good at school, and it paid out for him. He ended up at a top Ivy League college with a full ride from grants that were given out to the smartest of the smart. Point: within that first year of college, he had become a drinking machine and apparently struggled to even attend classes. I only heard through friends that knew him better, but it was not pretty. Gained tons of weight, drinking controlled him, grades never about a C. Good news is he turned that around by junior year after a semester off. He came back to our high school to even do a speaker series on his experiences. College was that first time he had a sense of open-ended pathways. He froze and went down that party path. He admitted that up until mid-college he had no plan that he had made himself. He was just following the "this is what you do" path to be successful. Study hard, get good grades, go to a good college. But after that it wasn't as clear-cut what to do. And he struggled to hold his head above water when not moving forward. It was a good lesson on being internally purposeful and not to appease others or to meet generic societal expectations. All the talent or knowledge in the world is useless if it's directionless. Most of us are depressed because we feel out of place. We can have friends, even great friends, but in the back of your head you don't belong. We have issues dealing with emotions. I'd assume anyone that is smart that has picked up alcohol to tone down the billions of combinations of things going through their minds is probably an alcoholic by now. The people closest to us are probably the best things for us as well. Shout out to the friends of smart people I know. For some of us at sometimes it's gotta be rough. We go down rabbit holes of thought and can basically learn anything that we want to quickly, although it might be an hour until that thing is exhausted or bores us. Rabbit holes can lead us down trying to do random seemingly impossible shit or thinking about how to solve some problem, and we can probably fixate on that for months if it's interesting to us. We probably have a great job that we still might not find challenging, or we do work so fast we can slack off the rest of the time, or we drop that and try to pursue what made us happy. People will tell us we are being stupid and not living up to our potential, like they want us to fix the world. Like, what the fuck do you want me to do? Or we don't sleep well either. And if anyone is like me and finds themselves using the credit card sleep method, I hear you sleep TFN until 2 PM on Saturday. You basically didn't sleep all week. I also hear that we dream better, which depending on the dream may or may not be a good thing. When it is something great, the best. When it is you fighting ninjas with swords and getting stabbed or shot or ran down by dogs and you wake up feeling phantom pain soaked in sweat, not the best. Sometimes I wish I wasn't smart too. That way people wouldn't expect me to be a certain way or achieving some sort of level of success or answering their simple math questions because I can. My sister is super smart. Very smart. She'll tell you that her job is basically Don Cheadle in House of Lies. I've never seen someone so intelligent, so supreme in her maturity, so evolved, so wise of the ways of the earth constantly be the victim, scammed, lied to, and taken advantage of. I don't speak to my father. It became apparent about 12 years ago that among other things, he was a con artist who ran a Ponzi scheme, borrow money from an investor, to pay back another investor, to borrow more money without ever actually producing anything. I've never seen so many smart people get so easily conned. Doctors, a few lawyers, real estate investors, and Wall Street types. They all bought what he was selling and were 100% sure that no one like my dad could be capable of tricking them. My mentor used to say, "You're the dumbest smart person I know," and it took a while, but I now understand what he meant. Some smart people assume they're the smartest at everything, and it makes them easy marks. My wife is super smart and has fancy degrees including an MD. She's an overachiever in business, medicine, and personally, I believe marriage. She takes failure very poorly. If she isn't good at something, she quits quickly. Now, she's good at a lot of things, but generally speaking she is wary of trying new things out of fear of being bad at them. Me, an idiot, will try anything. Build a homemade parachute? Sure. A deck? I'll just Google it and go buy a hammer. How hard can it be? I've never been great at anything and have only been good at a few things. I'm immune to failure. In my experience, smart people are not and can be inhibited by it. I will share my own experience here as someone that was diagnosed as gifted from a very young age. Sometimes, great intelligence is comorbid with some disabilities, disorders or the likes. For example, I was diagnosed as autistic alongside being gifted. In my case, I think this played a greater role in my difficulties in life and my overall feeling of loneliness than my intelligence ever did. You oftentimes process information much faster than your peers, which in turn make any sort of cooperative exercise hard. For example, in group projects, I would often understand the requirements right away, whereas my teammates would need more time to assimilate what needed to be done. To assist them, I would try to explain my understanding, but some people would find it patronizing, while others would simply get discouraged that they couldn't grasp what was to be done when I could. Over the years, I had to learn to pace myself and wait for people to catch up in their own ways in order to proceed with group projects and the likes. People sometimes despise you for being intelligent. For example, people would make fun of me in school for having the top grades all the time. I still remember to this day one of my good friend at the time being absolutely disgusted that she had to study a whole week for an exam, only to have lesser results than I did not studying at all. She stopped being my friend that year, and to this day, I'm still sad about it. This sort of jealousy would also be commonplace in my family. My own siblings would root for me to fuck up so they could look better in comparison. It seems sometimes that everyone wants to see you fail to bring you down a peg or something. This can feel very isolating because you feel like you're on your own and nobody's rooting for your success. Sometimes you have to hide your talent to keep friends and family happy. For example, my brother was never really good at most things. He had a learning disability from a young age, which made everything harder for him. School, sports, music, most anything was impossible for him. One day, he decided to follow in my mom's footsteps and learn to play the guitar. He was a teenager at the time, and I was a kid. I remember he would struggle immensely learning this instrument. As a young naive kid, I wanted to get closer to my brother, so I tried learning the guitar alongside him. This was a bad idea in hindsight, because the very moment I started to surpass his ability, it made him stop. He became discouraged that he couldn't play as good as I did. This happened my whole life with friends and family. People would constantly compare themselves to me and get discouraged. Over time, I learned to simply keep my achievements to myself, so I can let others have their moment of glory. This is a very lonely path to follow, as it means essentially hiding most of your life from your friends and family. To appease them, people seem to think that you are invincible. They start to believe that nothing can ever stop you. Mostly because they've seen you succeed years over years, and they believe the rest of your life will be as such. So if you ever encounter great difficulties in your life, people dismiss your calls for help. Or so they did in my case. When I came down with an intense bout of depression a few years ago, my friends and family would simply tell me that I had nothing to be depressed about. That someone as smart as me could get through anything. In hindsight, I don't think they were trying to be dismissive of my needs. I genuinely think they thought there was no way I could fall like that. All in all, this can feel quite isolating. People will constantly try to take advantage of you. Or at least this has been my experience over the years. For example, my professors would make me work harder in school so they could use my projects to boast to the administration about the quality of their teachings. One year, the school's administration even teamed up with one of my teacher to have me develop an application for them for free. They disguised this as a project I needed to accomplish as part of my course. I only realized how absurd this was when I compared my project to that of my classmates and realized this did not have close to the crazy amount of requirements mine had. This experience has repeated in my life constantly. People have always tried to use my kindness and naivety to get what they want. Nowadays, I find myself having to be on my guard most of the time, and I rarely, if ever, give my trust easily. I find this very isolating and tiresome. This is all I can come up with for now. There's probably more to say about it, but I can't think of anything more at this instant. All in all, I'll probably get downvoted to hell for posting this, as people rarely, if ever, like a personal opinion on these kinds of questions. I've noticed that posting about someone else is oftentimes preferable than posting about your own experience with these threads, as doing the latter comes off as r/I am verisimilitude material to most. Nonetheless, I hope it at least helps answer Op's question. I see a lot of experiences related to not facing a lot of challenges in school, which led to them being lazy/unable to face adversity, etc. But I'd like to share an alternative based on my own similar experience. I'll preface by saying that I'm probably not genius smart, but teachers offered my parents to skip me a grade Spoiler, they refused, and I cruised through grade school and high school with high 90s to 100s in every core courses, basically everything except arts. Even in university, it took until my third semester to hit core courses grades under 90, which is where I faced a wall and had a year or two, 2 to 3 semesters, of doing nothing about it, and my grade slipping in the 50s, barely passing. Still doesn't feel fair to pass at 50 to me. However, I completed my bachelor's of statistics, and I believed what helped me get back on my feet and try to identify the issue and work on it, i.e. my work ethic, has been facing challenges in other areas of my life than school. For example, even though I was not the most athletic kid, my dad would frequently hammer it to give my maximum each time and to work hard in practice, as hard as you would in a game. He was also in the trades, and made us help him as teenagers, drilling into me and my siblings to always do a job as best as you can, and not cut corners. And later on, as we were of the age to have jobs, starting 13 to 14 years old, he'd pay for less and less things for us to have an incentive to work and make money of our own. These lessons, of course, did not translate to school immediately. They were separate kinds of challenges. Why would I work my ass off in school when I can succeed so easily? Although, once I realized that I was indeed able to work very hard in different aspects of my life, I decided to work on it for school stuff. And my grades improved in the last 3 semesters of my degree, improving by nearly 10% each time, back to high 80s/low 90s in my last semester, while taking master's equivalent courses. Why am I sharing this? If you are gifted, or have a gifted kid, look into other parts of your life where you can find a challenge and a place you worked hard. Also, work ethic can be developed and can be improved. 2 years out of uni, I still struggle with it. I force myself to read a chapter of an advanced textbook per week to get the ball rolling. I also try to work out semi-regularly to have my nose not always in books or on a screen. TLDR, being smart and having an easy way through school is not ideal to develop work ethic or socialize. But there are other ways to be challenged and socialized in life. Sports, arts are 2 examples of the top of my head. Find something other than school that makes you struggle and work hard at it with the time saved on school stuff. I'm very convinced that being smarter is almost not a thing. I'm the laziest person I know. My family, wife, many friends/coworkers say I'm either the smartest person they know or up there. My current theory is I don't have the ability to recognize that my way of talking sounds condescending, or I give the impression that I think I'm better than people. Then they just either vibe with it or think I'm fishing for compliments. It would explain why I'll always have those 1 or 2 people in a group that just dislike me entirely, and I can't figure out why. I know I'm not smart though, because I don't actually do things, because I'm so lazy that I can't make myself do things unless it's an urgent 1 to 3 hour sprint. I spend 90% of time after college doing nothing at work and taking naps, and then get like 3 promotions to leadership position in my first 3.5 years. I've had to take status on other people's work that I don't even specialize in, and I'm expected to help them work through problems when literally the best I can do is brainstorm with them, let them bounce ideas off me until they get to the solution themselves. Out of pure luck, the actual smart people are a few on my team that, luckily, I've been able to give enough glowing review for, that their job title keeps up with mine. This whole comment sounds douchey. I really try to be nice and come off welcoming, I promise. Normal people fear smart people. If you've got some big dumb idiot, you can just look at him and have a pretty good idea of what he's capable of. Simple people have simple motivations and simple means to achieve them. But a smart person, you have absolutely no faking clue what they're fully capable of. I can pick up and put down heavy things too and get as strong as anyone. But if you aren't already a Mensa level genius, you can't be and will never be. There's absolutely no way you can equal yourself to another superior intellect, and you will never understand them or even keep up. Smart people are always an unknowable quantity and there is nothing you can do about it. I'm not smart. I write software. People think I must be smart, but I merely have the temperament for it. Most people I know loathe the idea of sitting at a desk staring at text all day. I'm nothing. But as you can imagine, I've met some truly smart people in the course of my career. Genius level. If you've ever met one, you'd know. If you're not sure, then you haven't. These people are like they're from outer space. It really feels like you're in the presence of a goddamn alien. I can't begin to describe what it's like being in a room full of geniuses, or even being around just one. They're very hard to interact and socialize with, and it's because they are on another level. They are way above and ahead of you, and at best they are being polite, waiting for you to take their clues and catch up. You are not equal, and they are probably actually bored to the point of frustration point. After having met a few, I understand why Mensa exists. They're starving for intellectual peers, someone they can have a decent conversation with, people they can relate with. The pressure is immense. Having one type of intelligence doesn't mean you have all the types, and some intelligences are deemed more important or smarter than the others. Emotional intelligence, the capacity to greatly understand one's own emotions and extend that knowledge to the understanding of other people's emotions. It will often be classified as maturity by adults who see a child with such intelligence. Yet this child might be expected to also be good at math and good in school in general, because grades are more important point. But that type of intelligence doesn't do math. Heck, it doesn't even do social skills. Understanding someone's emotion doesn't mean you automatically know what to say to diffuse a situation. Point intelligence is one's capacity to intuitively learn about some things depending on what type of intelligence it is. It does not equate to being born with a set of skills associated with their intelligence type. Like I said, emotionally gifted people are not born with innate social skills. Quite the contrary, understanding too much of someone's emotion is seen as creepy. People with mathematical intelligence still need to learn 1 plus 3 equals 4 before being able to do 3x plus 3 equals 12x equals 3. It's not innate, it's easier to learn. And once enough knowledge is learned, they can deduce things on their own. On a more adult level, once you reach a certain age, you can increase your knowledge and learn not to make bad decisions, but you can't really become more intelligent. Meaning as a genius, if you meet someone who isn't at your level, you can be pretty sure that they'll never reach your level. And if it hurt you while growing up to have no one to confide your smart issues with, imagine trying to find a partner. Imagine spending the rest of your life with a partner that simply cannot understand you. Point last thing, being intelligent doesn't make you impervious to life's ups and downs. Being intelligent is no protection from mental issues that can damage said intelligence. ADHD, dyslexia and all sorts of learning difficulties can happen in people with higher level of intelligence, making them pass for people with regular levels of intelligence, never able to reach their full potential. Trauma, PTSD, depression, all sorts of things that make people go down a dark hole of bad behaviors. Smart people are often left to fend on your own because you're smart. You'll figure something out. You'll get out of this even stronger, as if they don't need emotional support, as if they have all the answers. As I said, pressure to perform is immense. It feels like it's something that people look down on you for more than celebrating. I have a very high IQ, measured by a real test, WACE, proctored by my therapist. I'm in the 99.98th percentile for intelligence by that metric. Every single discussion about IQ I've ever read always includes the exact same 3 talking points. IQ doesn't mean anything other than measuring how good you are at taking IQ tests. Stephen Hawking said that anyone who brags about their IQ is a loser. The most intelligent people I know are humble and don't talk about their intelligence. They're just normal people. I've never met a single person that ever intimidated me intellectually. I actually didn't even realize until recently that that was a feeling or experience that I was missing out on. The same way that a 6'9" person doesn't know what it's like to be towered over. In the thousands and thousands of people I've met in my life, I've met maybe 3 that I would consider to be as smart as I am, but I've never met a single person that ever made me feel like, okay, I feel so dumb talking to this person. The thing that's sad, in my opinion, is that I should feel really happy about that, but I don't feel like sharing that is valued at all. It should feel like something worth celebrating and being proud of. No one wants to hear their friends say I'm the smartest person I've ever met, so I don't say it. And of course it makes sense. No one likes a braggart. No one likes to be around someone so full of themselves that they would say something like that. I get it. It just feels very isolating to have something that feels like a great gift and to not acknowledge it out of politeness. First of all, I consider myself above average, and that is based on a lot of parameters. I can only speak for myself. Few pointers: when I achieve a goal, I experience a profound sense of loss. I have come to realize that common sense isn't common. Point: yes, I do have OCD, GAD and dreadful ideals of nihilism and existentialism. Point: if I were to speak what I truly feel/think, I would likely be put in the loony bin. Knowledge is infinite. Anyone who claims to have mastered something is delusional. You can never be 10/10ths. Point: inequality can never be completely eliminated. As such, can economics ever be a zero-sum game? People who are quick to reject ideas just because our five senses are inadequate to experience it do more harm than good in the name of science. I am lonely, even when I have friends around. I can't seem to put source to my sadness, like it is my default outlook. I don't think I'm depressed per se. Just sad, with a tint of melancholy. Point: I compose music in my dreams. I get frequent epiphany, and then can't sleep, eat or do anything else. I know for a fact that there is no perfect individual. Just scratch the surface and you will find the flaws. Conversely, every individual is unique, and it's not a cliche. I can never be faster than Usain Bolt, and is a fact. Point: I don't crave to be rich or powerful. Eventually we'll die, so why bother? Can't take the riches to afterlife, if there is one. Most people think they're smart, and it's hard to disagree, because the way we define smart isn't concrete or exact. And if you look at it in a relativistic perspective, then most people are smart compared to their ancestors, since our educational requirements, access, and rigor have changed. Go back far enough in time and you being able to read is like being able to build an Iron Man suit in a cave. I think it's interesting to look at these answers as three different types: the people who are writing about themselves, the people who are writing about someone they know that they place above themselves intellectually. Point: and the people writing about the mythic genius. As for my own answer, I'd say there is no sad truth. There's no universal pain or anguish or suffering if you're smart that plays into that mythic trope in the third category, the tortured genius. It would be like asking the sad truth about people who have a good sense of taste, and some of the replies here aren't about being smart, especially the people moaning about themselves on the sly. If you're lonely and isolated, or people avoid you, sometimes you're just an asshole. Some people are shy or awkward, but then, you know that's not because you're smart. If you place the emphasis of your isolation on your intelligence, you're probably placing yourself on a pedestal, and that's why nobody likes you. Most of the time it's a good idea to not let your ego get to your head that you're smart. Your ego is a fallible emotion that always likes to think you're smarter than you really are, even if you are objectively smart. Nobody likes a smart, as I'd argue most people who aren't smart are only that way because after a certain age they just stop maturing/growing as people. If you're a smart person, the older you get the more and more you realize you're continuing to grow and mature, while most of your family and friends stopped at the ages of 16 to 20. I distinctly remember getting to the age of 30 and realizing that I was ahead of most other people mentally, whereas at the age of 20 I never felt like the smartest person in the room. Point: it's hard to describe how I know the above, but most other people just have some sort of hard limit their brain runs into when facing a challenge, or some kind of uncontrolled tic, or an obvious mental blockage when trying to process certain information, while I do not. Sure, I'm better at being creative and dynamic than I'm at solving logic puzzles, but I never find that I run into something that completely goes over my head, or that I can't work through. A friend of mine, for example, just cannot handle cross-pollinating concepts when learning a new game where its main mechanic played like playing sweets from playing cards/poker. He simply couldn't make the connection between the two concepts and struggled to play the game. He requires things to be very spelled out, and strategy doesn't develop at all until lots of repetition. Another friend has a lack of awareness in what is going on with any plot thread/writing with substance for movies we watch. A scene will play out, and he'll make fun of a character who got in a sticky situation without understanding the deeper motivations of the character, or a joke will completely go over his head. Stuff like that. Intelligence isn't a number or even a spectrum. It's a specialism. You might be really smart at problem solving, but be really dumb at handling social dynamics or acting quickly. I do think there is a smart people have more brain activity in general going on, which allows them to solve harder problems, or be able to be a lot more diverse/adaptable. But even dumb people can be really smart at a thing their brain has specialized at being good at. This ties into my first point. Keep that ego in check, because it's easy to assume you're the smartest person in the room when in reality you're just dealing with a brain that doesn't work like yours does. Relates to the above, but just because you might be actually smart doesn't mean people who are less smart than you are overall are less worthy or have less value. It's the duty of those with advantages to help bring up everyone else and create a stronger harmony. Because if we want to be cold and calculating about it, if every human being was being used to their fullest potential, the collective intelligence of the human race would skyrocket. That only happens when you're not trying to beat down, lord over, or see yourself better than people who might not have developed the same way as you. And in doing so, you might discover just how smart a lot of people are. Edit. And on that note, intelligence isn't everything. Someone might be dumb, but they are incredibly loyal and dependable, or incredibly good at galvanizing people into action, or great at having energy, or very flexible, or incredibly empathetic. These are all amazing traits to have, and our society's health as a whole is a product of all of this. At the end of the day, we're primates who are controlled by emotion chemicals. These chemicals trump all. The human that is winning the most in life isn't solving the hardest or even the most interesting problems. The ones that are winning have the highest amount of dopamine and serotonin in their brains, achieved by living the most fulfilling and happy life possible, while also not being a detriment to others. You can achieve that by being smart, but you can also achieve that by being great at connecting with people or through physical prowess. What is smart? How much of it is memorization and regurgitation? IQ is a myth. The original tests were never designed for adults and weren't a measure of knowledge as much as the ability to gain knowledge. My grandfather once rebuilt a old mantle clock. He disassembled it, retooled every gear from sheets of brass using 1970s hand tools, and reassembled it. It worked for another 40 years. There was no internet or manual. Was he smart? If you take a gifted child and teach them that pursuing intellect is more important than functional relationships with their peers, you do them a disservice. Life is more than intellect. I personally think that initiative and drive are more important than intellect. I think about people who are gifted, and what makes me sad is how often people dismiss them because they can't grasp what the smart person is saying. I'm moderately typicalish. I once had a group of employees working in a car dealership installing fiber optic and cameras. Their staffed guy had a question. Since I was there to pull cable, I was in jeans, a t-shirt and baseball cap. I rarely do what I call speaking geek, because people can't normally understand. His question required a detailed and technical explanation. When I was done, people were staring, like I was a sideshow freak. When I asked why they were staring, they said they thought I was a pain to truly intelligent people are frightening to many because they see a world that most people will never even notice exists. It is easier to mask and be typical. I don't think smart people are mentally okay. School doesn't stimulate them. They are more than likely just dragging themselves along mind-numbing and monotonous work for 7 classes a day, unless they go into accelerated learning, which then can substantially isolate them from social networking and connections that they could have made with people their age. Their minds, not brain, exists at a different state of maturity than most people, thus their concerns and interests aren't always going to be similar and cohesive to the average person's, thus they'll have to always put up with reconciling such a rift between them and others. Recent studies have shown intellect and mental illness go hand in hand, so like that surely can't be fun. Living in a postmodern society, hell-bent on worker productivity, hustle/grind culture, with little in the sense of a genuine meritocracy, as someone who can understand and conceptualize the problems around them, whereas others are still integrated and compliant with systems that perpetuate such detriments, has to be demotivating in the sense of making a worthwhile impact/legacy with your life. They are seen as powerful individuals, and often are, but such a conception often misattributes the idea that they are creatures almost entirely self-dependent on themselves, as if they have everything figured out, which isn't the case, and can often be a veneer as they are smart enough to know how to seem functional, and have very likely lived a life where they were taught to conduct themselves in such a way, in order to become an individual capable of excellence. Usually they are quieter than stupid people. I wish it was the other way around, but usually when you become smarter, more educated, more open to other points of views and ideas, you not only become more introspective, because you're thinking things through, but you're also often not like grossly vehement with your positions, because you feel comfortable and confident in your ability to entertain others' points of view. Stupid people, however, are loud and often crass. They don't know what they don't know, because they don't know a lot. The little that does fill their head seems to be their whole world, and by golly will they fight to defend it. I mean, it's all they have. So it's really wild to watch. Dumb people are often loud and wrong. Smart people are right and quiet. Lord, would it be nice if the loud and the quiet could be switched in these scenarios. But I think that's where the idea of ignorance is bliss comes in. These stupid people are basically like babies trucking around, not realizing how much destruction they are causing, but they feel great, usually because some form of privilege that has never forced them to be checked on whatever they are really dumb about. People who are right should feel more comfortable being louder too. To combat the loud absolute stupidity out there a lot these days. There's a lot of different types of smartness. I'm seeing a lot of you discuss people who are book smart, so I wanna talk about street smarts. The thing about smart people, street smarts, is that they actually don't have to work very hard at all. However, it can cause a lot of stress that they could lose everything or that everything is constantly on the line, since they didn't work very hard for it but shortcutted their way in. That's how I feel. Somehow I've managed a nearly full ride college scholarship. I'm on my second year now and barely do anything. I feel like my life is riddled with anxiety, or that I'll constantly have to explain myself. It's strange because I know that I'm smart. I know that I could have earned everything if I just tried, but it was easier to fake it. So I think street smarts can be very damaging to a person's self-worth. I definitely worked for the things I've gotten, just in a different way than most people. Still, I constantly feel like the rug is gonna get pulled out from under me. Like I'm some big fake. I'll also say that it's very lonely. Not being able to relate to other people's interests or knowledge level is very depressing. Just a week ago I was talking to my friend about how to pass a class she never attended. ML advisement. CC the president of the college. ECT. And threatened to sue the professor or something. And she was literally shocked. She couldn't believe was that easy. Just send a few angry emails. Then suddenly I feel like some sick manipulative mastermind, and I can't find anyone else in a college setting who can relate, because they are all book smart. Now I get why Elizabeth Holmes dropped out and why Anna Delvey didn't even go to college. Lol. Either way, faking it till you make it really does work. But overall, I'd say street smarts are very damaging on how someone sees their personal self-worth, and of course a constantly feeling of dread or anxiety. People don't like it when you know their emotions better than they do. You internally realize why democracy doesn't work after meeting enough people. If you weren't gifted with emotional intelligence as well, it's most likely very lonely. Mental illness hits harder. You're constantly worried about seeming like a smart aleck for correcting someone, or rather lack thereof. Helping someone with their homework is dangerous if you don't want to commit to doing in the future. You have to deal with the disappointment of a group of friends not being able to understand the game you just got, because it's too complex for them. Practicing listening to people's problems, and not just stating the solution that's obvious to you. Irrational people, such as certain people involved in politics. I live my daily life with the goal to use my gifts to help others. It has some downsides for sure. But at the end of the day, I know I'm smart enough to be there for my friends and girlfriend, even when they can't figure out how themselves. I see every human as a puzzle. Negative things picked up, such as constantly apologizing, is the effect of emotional neglect or abuse. I focus on those negative effects, and I trail the strings back to the cause. Once you do it enough, patterns become clear. After that, you can truly understand someone. Their potential is wasted through the school system. I'm talking about the average smart gifted not genius kids. Schools may give work 1 or 2 grades above. They may skip the kid a grade, but they are still not intellectually simulated. If they are pushed by parents to be too smart, they will be isolated among their peers, as they are often socially maladapted due to not connecting with people their age. Then, no/poor study habits, no/poor work habits, high rates of mental illnesses etc. While they may be academically smart, they struggle with burnout, self-disappointment from not living up to their potential. I'm in my last year of high school. I'm graduating a year early. That makes it evident that I'm smart. As one person said, their grade 12s, getting younger and smarter. I look younger than my actual age too, which doesn't help either. I'm nearly 17, but look 14. I'm only 1 grade above, so it's fine. I'm morally opposed to people who are put more than 2 grades up by high school. They should either stay in school and do extra classes and extracurriculars, or homeschool/online school with app and online collage courses and extracurriculars. Going to college young is then a case-by-case basis. Second or third rate intelligence is worse than being average. I had my IQ tested as part of a comprehensive psychological exam for mental health reasons, and apparently I'm at like top 10, 15% or so. It checks out. I was in the gifted program, coasted through high school. I walked into many exams with zero preparation and independently derived the theorems that I needed to know for the exam on the spot. But I'll never be the top 1% or the top 0.1%, yet people around me expect me to be as successful as those geniuses. Cause in my family I'm the smart kid, so I must get into MIT. I didn't. Or get straight A's. I didn't. And get a PhD. Struggling with bachelors. I always wanted to be a scientist. Still do. Now I realize, though, that basically everyone from PhD up are at least as smart as me. I'm the dumbest person in the room, and I decided that it's okay to be the dumbest person to get a PhD, if that means I get to do some cool stuff for 7 years. It's still cool to be able to be close enough to the bleeding edge that I can sort of understand what the actually smart people are doing. But that humility took time to develop. It can be crushing to realize that you're above average enough to try, but not excellent enough to succeed. P.S. A lot of people in this thread are using the top 10, 30% smart as their definition of smartness, and speaking from their experience of being third-rate intelligent. Then all the circle jerking are mocking these people by using a different definition of smart, top 0.1% smart. I hope this doesn't get me featured on r/I am very smart, but I have to get something off my chest. I'm not going to list my IQ nor boast about it. It is not the measure of a person, and it's essentially meaningless for me. I often feel lonely and disappointed in people in general. The ways that people try to manipulate me and others is incredibly clear to me. I'm far from cut off from people, though. Generally I'm very sociable, and people laugh and joke with me all the time. There isn't that awkwardness that Hollywood makes tropes about. It's more like, deep inside, I think to myself, for example, wow, that guy just wants me to invest my money with him. He doesn't really care about me or anyone else at all. Or, I just know things about people that I meet. There is rarely surprise with people, I guess, if that makes sense. It's wonderful when people do things I don't expect them to do. In an odd way, I even appreciate when they do things that are bad and out of character. At least it's something different. I guess the sad truth is that most people are predictable, selfish, and dishonest. They stretch the truth for their own benefit, and they even lie to themselves. That said, I love people in general. I love the natural world around us, and the mechanics of our universe are astounding to me. We are all really dumb in comparison to how much knowledge there is to be gained about life, the universe, and everything. Knowing this keeps everything in perspective, but it also drives an insatiable desire in me to never stop learning about what makes the universe and people tick. Depression. Literally every kid I went to school with had some form of anxiety, stress, or depression disorder. Many of their parents and peers pressured them to get the best grades and have the highest GPA. I used to be one of those people, but I had a rough semester in my app chemistry class, got a C, and gave up on a science career altogether cause I never would have gotten into any of the colleges around here with one C. It's an insane amount of pressure to put on kids and the competition only makes it worse. They had to get rid of valedictorian at graduation because so many kids were committing suicide if they didn't have the grades to get it or someone else did. Most of us thought that if you didn't get good enough grades and then into a good college you were doomed for a poor life working at McDonald's or at home with your parents. Honestly, if you weren't depressed you were seen as selfish/rude for having self-confidence. Though I would like to point out that intelligence doesn't mean you get good grades in school or good at math/science. I'm currently majoring in art, and I still consider myself a smart person, even if all the STEM majors don't agree with me. I love STEM activities, I just didn't major in it, because I wouldn't have gotten in with my C. That doesn't make me any less smart. We are all intelligent in our own way. Also, piggybacking over what I said earlier, many smart people lack self-confidence, so they may be making fun of you, because being smart is the only thing they have. This really sums up a lot points separately. Smart can mean different things. If we mean those who do well in school, it often really describes kids who are compliant, people-pleasing, do what they are told, and make their teachers happy. So many of those people lose themselves in the school system that's designed to push them ahead of others who aren't so compliant to that system. For them, they may succeed in things like math, reading, science, and the like, and while they may be told to do stuff like art and music, they are not really told why. So they do those other classes because they are told to, then promptly drop it. When it's no longer a mandatory class, then they grow up without a creative outlet because everything they do is supposed to be in the pursuit of success, that is, making money. Success in school is earning A's on a report card. Once you no longer have a report card, you need some other external signal of you're doing the right thing. The only thing equivalent to that in the real world is a paycheck. Bigger paycheck, closer to an AUR point, all the while missing out on enjoyment of the moment and of life. Not knowing how to connect with your emotions and know what your body and your brain are telling you. Pushing all that down because you need to appear successful point when smart means capable. You're pushed up to and even past your breaking point because others will drop the ball. If you're a high performer, high performance is constantly expected. If you're not living up to that, you're letting everyone else down. And if they are disappointed in you, you're disappointed in yourself. You're judged more harshly than those who aren't as capable. When they do something that comes naturally to you, they are praised, and you're ignored. Point failure is seen as a negative. You never learn how to fail gracefully or fail forward. That's not taught. Failure is a bad thing to be avoided at all costs. To the point that you get so scared of failure, you just won't even try anything new. If you're not instantly good at something, you either work yourself to death to get good at it, or abandon it immediately. And being good at something means having objective measures with clear definitive answers. If you can't get that, the feedback loop in your brain won't know what to do. I can't speak to others' experiences, but I grew up a gifted kid who never needed to study for tests and aced everything like it was nothing. Point in elementary, I was regarded as some sort of oracle. All the kids thought I knew everything and would ask me random questions on the playground just because they genuinely thought I would know. As far as anybody knew, I was the smartest being to ever live, and I had the grades to back it up. In middle school, the smart reputation followed me, but because I hadn't learned how to study or improve, I wasn't any smarter than anybody else. My grades weren't even the best anymore, but I was still the smart kid nonetheless. I had a sort of identity crisis by the end of 8th grade, as the weight of expectation and public image bore down on me. Everybody thought I was smart, and I was often singled out for it. I was bullied for being the nerd, and I wasn't even any smarter or better than anyone else anymore. But that's all anybody thought I was, and if I couldn't even be that anymore, then what the hell was I? The answer I often came to was nothing. I thought I was nothing. I transferred districts to get a fresh start when I entered high school. No more reputation, no more bullying, no more identity crisis. I was free to be myself without anybody else imposing their own perspective on me. Despite still never learning how to study, I managed to BS my way through high school with decent grades and had a fun time doing it. I made great friends who I still hang out with today and generally had a very positive high school experience. Today, in my second semester of college, though, I'm feeling the most effects. My first semester went fine. I managed to keep my grades up, go to classes, pass the tests, everything I needed to, but I burned myself out very badly. Second semester, I had no motivation to work for anything. I've never had to work at anything school related in my life because it always came so easily to me. To this day, I still can't study, I can't pay attention in lectures, and I can't sit through a test without getting frustrated at difficult questions. My life is made so much harder now because it was always so easy growing up. I never learned how to work for what I want. TLDR. Grew up lazy because smart. Don't know how to work for anything as an adult. Being misunderstood. I didn't even know it was possible that I could really be smart until I realized I have to simplify my speech to a lot of people. Sometimes someone is smart enough to hold a conversation about a topic, but even then, sometimes I have to break down logic and examples for people to understand. I have to use metaphor a lot to get my points across, and that works really well. I also try to express my views symbolically by living a life that isn't stupid. I have common sense, which isn't so common. I don't know if that makes me smart, but I feel like a lot of people are objectively dumb. I know I'll get downvoted for this, but IDC, I know my grades, I know what I know. I spend my time reading articles about physics, astronomy, biology, animal behaviors, politics, historical events, theology, everything under the sun that you can study. I know at least enough to hold a conversation and understand the gist of what you're saying. And the hardest part of all of it, besides not truly being able to connect on an intellectual level with anyone, is that I will have epiphanies and amazing ideas, tell them to people, and they just won't get it. If I take an hour to explain the idea in full detail, they most likely can understand, but I always get the feeling that people do not probe how they feel and what they think deep enough, and are too lazy in their attempts to understand the world around them, or me for that matter. This life is tiring, and every ounce of thought dedicated to something that isn't your own idea or belief or feeling is energy that could be wasted when you know you're right about everything anyway. Or at least that's the vibe I get, and that's why I have this belief. I don't really like the term smart people, personally. I think it's all a spectrum, and often people mean educated when they say smart. And most people are educated about something, even if society doesn't value it. And intelligence in terms of being able to think better, calculate or reflect better, can be improved to point. But I generally think of myself as smart, and have been all my life, and I think it can cause a ton of problems. I'll try to boil it down to a few, but they're all related for me. First, is smart people are sometimes more perceptive about certain things, often because they hyper-focus, which causes them to notice issues or complexities more than the average person. This can be really stressful, being acutely aware of issues that most people more or less accept or push aside. And I think relatedly, this causes smart people to often care way more about issues or problems that aren't directly in our control. We see connections in the world that others might not focus on or see, so see how things are stressful, etc. It reminds me of in Annie Hall how Woody Allen's character as a child is constantly depressed because the universe is expanding. Not everyone has that level of perception at a young age, and sometimes smart people don't have the coping skills to let it go. And lastly, all of this can cause the smart person to just focus on things and not be quite as practical as they should or could be. Most people just want a decent paying job they don't hate, a good family and friend group, some nice weather and good food, good health, etc. That simplifies it, and everyone cares about something bigger than themselves than just that. Politics, things that affect their kids, what's right and wrong, etc. But I find that smart people particularly fixate on those bigger things more and have a tougher time focusing more on what they can enjoy and just having a normal good life. Hope that makes some sense. TLDR, smart people often are more overly perceptive, care more because they notice the complex and tough problems of life more, especially ones out of their direct control, and can fixate more on these bigger issues. Everyone does this to a certain extent, but smart people have a tougher time accepting life and just trying to have a decent one. Depressive realism. Also realizing when you're talking to an ignorant person, and no matter how logical the argument, it is not registering, and you walk away, because you realize the time spent explaining why you're walking away is honestly wasted, and can be better utilized. You can also tend to question your own sanity, because you see things so obviously, and the majority fall for bullshit psychological stuff. For instance, an item on sale at a store, 95% of people see the word sale and feel all fuzzy inside and think they're practically losing money if they don't buy the item. Meanwhile, I sit there and think about 1, the money spent on the item, 2, which shelf that item is going to eventually end up sitting on, unused, and 3, how much the square footage the shelf takes up and what that ends up costing per month, and 4, how many hours of my life I paid to achieve the wages for said item, and for what? A tiny dopamine hit for a few seconds. You never hear anyone on their deathbed wishing they had bought more stuff, just that they had more time. Well, guess what? That $100 item just cost you 5 hours of time at your job that you despise, and that is 5 hours you could have allocated to create possibly the most lasting memory in your child's life. Who knows? I digress. This is that track I start easily going down. Anyways, I see the sale price and try to figure out which psychological marketing trick they are trying to pull on me. I feel like usually it's the perma sale where the sale price is just the actual price and the normally price above it is just some arbitrary bullshit number. But back to my original point, that 95% of people will try to convince me that the item is actually on sale when I know I'm right 100%. Hence the not bothering to explain to closed-minded ignorant people. I always lived by, would you rather be happy or right? I'd rather be happy and not spend my whole life arguing proud ignorance until I'm blue in the face, and instead talking with someone more open to critical thinking. Makes me feel like I'm taking crazy pills and question myself from time to time. I think schools fail our kids in that they encourage and mold the 9 to 5 grind routine, as well as questioning dumb meaningless tasks or directives about things you simply don't care about. You just gotta get A's. Who cares if you're passionate about the subject your paper is on? Same thing as an adult. Just gotta get that paycheck. Who cares if your curiosity, growth, desire to learn, or think critically is compromised? Then people wonder why they feel old, stuck in a rut, and like their life is Groundhog Day. Never stop asking why and seeking truth. Only 3 things don't stay hidden long: the sun, the moon, and the truth. This whole situation with Ukraine and Russia has me terrified as well. I had no idea how conformed and unaware a majority of the planet was already, and how bad it has gotten behind the scenes right under our noses since the internet. You see how Russia has so blatantly brainwashed an entire country, and I wonder how that's even possible with the internet and VPNs and international travel and businesses. Like, don't these fucking Russian people ever do business with a non-Russian country or phone a non-Russian person and be like, by the way, do they do this where you are from? Seems like the right question could shatter an entire worldview in just a few moments. But then I got to thinking, if it can happen in Russia or North Korea in 2022, which is seemingly unthinkable, why can't it happen to me, or where I live? And then I started digging around and noticing that big blue chip companies, like Google, probably do censor results and put results in your face that make them money in the form of connections or ads. So then I start looking up how to find actual search results, not ones with an agenda and narrative being pushed on me by the 1%. Cause they're ultimately the ones running things. Politicians are just bought and are mouthpieces for them. They get to be like the mob boss that way, far enough removed from the low-level peons on the streets that it's near impossible to catch them. But I've been realizing we are a little closer to 1984 than anyone realized, and it happens to gradually. They parade it around as national security in the form of things like the Patriot Act, but it's not really about that. It's about control, and it's being consolidated more than I think anyone realizes. I was also thinking how the world is essentially about to become a two-party system just like the good old US of A. Our founding fathers were vehemently against a two-party system, and look how faking good it's worked out for us. LMFAO. It creates a divide down the middle, and is a cancer. Two parties means polarized, black or white, no gray area. Find me one faking American that agrees 100% with one of the two parties. And they're usually ready to kill for their party that they barely identify with and is the lesser of two evils. They pick the party they feel somewhat aligned with instead of not aligned at all. Who benefits when the poor are at each other's throats? The faking rich just go ahead and slip a couple $1 trillion bill in here, throw in a sneaky provision on page 2xxx allowing $10 million to go to Pakistan for gender studies, pass this law allowing a loophole there, little insider trading here. Then people wonder why they're stuck, super faking poor, have no healthcare, because it's been used for defense, the same defense that everyone in the world looks at us to use every time there's a little conflict, which then results in our defense needing to be even bigger, which results in more taxes on the already growing lower classes. This conflict is creating a global-wide two-party system. Either you like a couple people in charge, Russia/China, thinking and living your life for you, which sometimes includes being lied to, sent to Ukraine on a moment's notice, and then having a missile drop on your head out of nowhere, or freezing to death in a giant, frozen metal refrigerator/coffin known as a Russian tank, or you want democracy and freedom. I use those terms loosely because even in democratic countries I think these things are being infringed upon at breakneck speeds, and are more of an illusion. It's starting to become, do you want early onset oligarchy or late stage oligarchy? Gotta admit I'm not a huge fan of late stage capitalism either. Ukraine and Russia, absolutely tragedy. Here's a thought, how about a faking country on the same faking continent as Ukraine takes the lead in managing this crisis? Jesus faking Christ, and I was a faking 11B infantryman in the army. You wanna increase your military might? Germany, faking go for it bro. Take some initiative. US will be your wingman in this case. I do follow GME and have been following that subreddit while they put together the biggest, most intricate, complex, complicated corruption puzzle of all time that consists of every major government in the world plus all the U-bridge. The connections are mind-boggling, and the sheet being uncovered flat out makes your skin crawl. I wish all this would have happened before I had kids. I might have reconsidered. But basically the rich people's club has been taking poor people's money and telling them they were gonna buy something on behalf of them and hold it, and then actually taking that asset, counterfeiting it multiple times to dilute value and add to theirs, and then when bankruptcy comes knocking they double dip and use the poor people's taxes for a bailout. So they steal from you, use what they stole to devalue what they were supposed to buy for you. And then when the books are finally checked and discrepancies are noticed they get a bailout. Happened in 2008. History has a way of repeating itself. Hitler, Putin, .2008, .2022. Do not let anyone tell you financial and economic problems are because of this war in Ukraine. It is because decades of fraud, corruption, and honestly America's very own kleptocracy. We are no better than Russia. The real attention needs to not be put on religious affiliations or ideations, but on the growing socio-economic gap and power imbalance. This economic doomsday that we are about to experience is 110% a result of never dealing with real problems from 2008 and simply putting a band-aid on things and kicking the can down the road. At this point band-aids are futile as we notice it's the femoral artery that's bleeding. It's bold I know, but I'm saying they doubled down on the corruption in 2008. It's slowly been uncovered during the meme stock era. Redditors were just about at the eureka moment of essentially uncovering the Illuminati, and a global war was the emergency maneuver to divert attention, while they crime the uncovered problems away on the second or third page of the news. I don't know, sheets faked. I'm sensing a taxation without representation attitude in the lower classes. Maybe actual paper money in the form of USD as RT that we throw in the Boston Harbor, since we have crypto and blockchain technology being integrated anyways. Side note, Russia is what you end up with when you substitute free thinkers with yes men. I figured to check out Reddit and that maybe it wasn't just a platform for kid gamers. You know, maybe I should reevaluate this opinion, and I feel like I kinda found the gathering place of the free thinkers, and what happens? The rich want Reddit to go public and have an IPO. Essentially they want Reddit to become a publicly traded company so they can buy 51% of it or to naked short it into bankruptcy and start cracking down on rules and bans to limit the think tanks and brainstorming that goes on. I think a big problem is the difficulty of finding a spouse. Being considerably smarter than someone can make conversation difficult. You don't even need to be smart to experience this. Being of average intelligence, you have probably interacted with people a standard deviation above and below you, and even at that point you can experience it. Being bombarded with more information than you can process makes it hard to keep up or even understand. You've probably needed to ask someone more intelligent to slow down, and you've probably been asked to slow down by someone less intelligent. Well, just imagine that everyone needs you to slow down. And now, dealing with people 2 or more standard deviations below you becomes more common, and a clear barrier is there. Communicating with even average people becomes difficult outside of small talk. To bring this full circle, your ability to have a meaningful, to you, conversation with someone is severely inhibited. If you are, say, 3 standard deviations above, you probably have problems interacting with about 97% of the population. So finding a fulfilling intellectual partner is hard. You then compound on that, a relationship with someone as smart as you can be equally difficult if you're in different fields, since the knowledge gap is so high that you will just run into the same problem. Too much information is necessary to parse what's being said. Having conversations about your passions can be so difficult. Using my wife and I as an example, and I'm not implying either of us is some kind of exceptional intellect. She's a psychologist, and I'm a software engineer. There is so much jargon for her field that it can be hard for me to follow when she's talking about a difficult case. Keeping the different forms of dyslexia straight, dysgraphia, all the categories on IQ tests, the categories of intelligence, crystallized knowledge, processing speed, visual spatial, and all the other things that go into it are difficult, even after hearing about it for 5 years. And vice versa. It is quite an effort for me to simplify the programming issues I have down to digestible chunks. She has a postmaster's degree, I have a bachelor's. As part of her degree she has both received an IQ test and given me one, and while the scores are invalid because they weren't done by qualified professionals, it at least provides us with an idea of the difference we have, and it is certainly not 2 whole standard deviations. If either of us was some kind of prodigy, the difficulties of communicating would be vastly amplified, and even if you bumped both of our IQs up by 30 points we would still have the exact same issue we do now. So, meaningful conversations are few and far between, widening the gap as the intelligence grows, and this makes all relationships hard, and especially affects living with someone. The smarter you are, the less fulfilling life is. It can feel like being a racehorse that never gets out of the stable. Speaking from personal experience, I never learned to work really hard at my goals because everything came very easy to me. The words of one of my teachers haunts me to this day. He is probably the most intelligent student I have ever taught, but he's also lazy. I remember thinking she was against me because in her particular class, although my grades were great, I was nonetheless evaluated much harder than my peers. As I continued through school, everything was just really easy. I also became anxious with time, and when I applied to law school, I got no sleep the night before, and didn't perform as well as I should have on the admissions exam. However, rather than keep at it, I just changed my focus to a relationship, got married, and started playing house. My partner had an excellent income, but was increasingly abusive and erratic. When I finally escaped from the marriage after a decade, I ended up feeling like I had few prospects. Even my pre-professional degree had left me with little options, because it was never intended to be a career. Going back to school doesn't seem realistic now. So I just feel like I never achieved my potential, a higher status, or financial security. In addition, I'm extremely creative, but my occupation doesn't allow me to use my intelligence or creativity, and I feel very unfulfilled. subordinate to those who simply played the game better. I also grew up in a wealthy family and was considered very handsome, so as time has gone on it just feels like a tremendous fall from the top. It's very depressing to be unfulfilled and realize that had this or that played out differently your life could have taken a dramatic turn for the better. My current partner is a lot younger and applying to medical school. They are very intelligent, but if I'm being honest I'm more intelligent, and although I'm very happy for them, part of me is a little jealous that their life is running on track and mine feels like a failure. Edit. Typo. Here's my own sadness. You see the problems, recognize where they stem from, but can't get anyone to understand. Point. You think about everything down to the very movement you make, and see lots of people who, if they'd stopped for half a second and thought, wouldn't have made that mistake. Point. Schools here aren't for you. Because of No Child Left Behind, you have to go the speed of the slowest kids in your class. People argue against you, even if they realize they are not on your level, and don't think about things as deeply. You can't win, so don't waste your time. This isn't to say I think I'm omniscient, but I also recognize very well that I don't know everything, and allow space for that in argument. Point. Pressure to succeed. This has been beat to death in this thread, and I can't add anything that hasn't already been said. Being smart in itself doesn't make a damn bit of difference in life. Dumb people succeed all the time and get into good positions just as, or more, often than smart people. They do hold the numbers advantage after all. Point. Depression. If you're so inclined to poke your head up and look at the big picture. People these days like to portray intelligence as the Big Bang type of people. This definitely doesn't hold true. You don't have to be autistic, nerdy, wear glasses, be a social outcast, or whatever other stereotype to be intelligent. Too many people like to envision the beautiful mind thing as well. Point. That about sums it up for me. There are different ways to be smart, and I'm not sure if that's a sad truth, but it could be if you view yourself as smart. Point. I've met some incredibly smart people that are socially stupid in a lot of ways. That is, they don't read people/situations well. They don't articulate an opinion or statement in a way that takes into account how people around them might perceive it, etc. I've also met some people that can thrive in a social arena, and not just in a way of being charismatic/likable or good looking, but actually knowing how to read people and situations to endear themselves and their opinions/statements to those around them. Those same social geniuses were not super book smart, didn't have that great of memories, and their problem solving/thinking outside the box wasn't that great. Additionally, I've met great athletes that have their own form of intuition and intelligence concerning their movement and predicting the movements of things outside themselves, people, objects, etc., which I consider its own form of intelligence. Our brains are super complex, and just because one part of your brain works really good doesn't mean it's necessarily smarter than someone else, though I will concede there will always be some people who are either better or worse than you in all of these different spheres of intelligence. Ralph Waldo Emerson stated it well in saying, "In my walks, every man I meet is my superior in some way, and in that I'll learn from him." TLDR, being academically smart does not mean you are smart in everything. And because you are smart/good at something does not mean you have to pursue a career in that, or even enjoy the subject. Point. You won't be good at everything you do. Point. I'm considered a smart student, and academically, I'd say I'm, as I have high grades, and it is easy for me to learn new things in school. But, for example, I struggle to learn the rules of sports, and I'm probably the dumbest person I know when it comes to figuring out a solution to a small problem. Point. Also, just because you are smart/good at something does not mean you have to pursue a career in that. Once I grasp a concept in math, it's generally pretty easy for me to solve an equation, but that doesn't mean I will ever pursue a math or engineering related career, because although I'm good at math and engineering, I hate the subjects. Whenever I tell someone, "Ugh, we have math next," classmates go, "Why are you complaining? It's easy for you. You're smart." Yeah, Tiffany. But that doesn't mean I like the subject. But you used to like math. Yeah, as a child. Things change. I'd rather pursue something in social sciences or humanities, because although storytelling and persuasive writing are nowhere near my strongest suit, I enjoy the subjects. There are many kinds of smart, and they come together in different ways to different effects. In my limited experience, once you get past some baseline of intelligence, are pretty smart, the majority of the differences can be explained by temperament and time spent towards their areas of interest point. If you have raw intellect, you can learn most things you put enough effort into. How smart you are is now mostly a function of how fast you can learn things and how much time you spend learning. I don't think most people appreciate how much time and effort smart people put into learning. There is a choice you make every day, every hour, every minute as to what you choose to think about. The famous commencement speech "This is Water" by David Foster Wallace touches on this idea. The thought you have right now, that is the thought you will have had for that moment of your life, forever. Your life is one long strand of thoughts and choices you make, so make sure you don't waste them. Smart people choose to learn, to practice and perfect what they have learned, and they waste less time doing things or thinking about stuff which does not serve those goals. This is a choice we all make every day, every hour, every minute. Smart people just make different choices, and those choices add up over the years, and the effect is more than cumulative. The more you know, the faster learning new stuff becomes, and the easier it is to fit new knowledge into your existing frameworks. Being smart, in and of itself, isn't all that useful. It's a bit like having a few extra tools at your disposal. Being smart doesn't get you out of doing the work. Consider the two big branches of knowledge: explicit knowledge found in books, tacit knowledge gained through doing, often referenced as wisdom. Yes, a more facile mind is useful in learning and retention. However, it doesn't help with the stick-to-itiveness required to read those books and do the work to earn wisdom. Being smart doesn't mean you can stop learning. Some clevers, especially those praised for being clever, often resist venturing too far into realms they know little of. Their identity is wrapped up in being perceived as clever, so they shy away from experiences where they feel out of their depth. Incuriosity slows learning, which is a problem, because the field of what we don't know we know is so vast it is basically inestimable. Being smart doesn't make you a success. Most of success in life isn't really about individual performance. Success, especially career success, is about building teams, setting clear objectives, and setting up others to be successful. On occasion you find highly intelligent people who are downright unintelligible on the management front. It's typically a bad time for everyone involved. There's an exchange from the movie Broadcast News that's always resonated with me. It must be nice to always believe you know better, to always think you're the smartest person in the room. No, it's awful. I'm not the smartest person I know, but at the times when I'm the smartest one in the room, suddenly there is so much more responsibility to get it right, and there's no one I can bounce ideas off of. I can't imagine what it's like for some of the scary smart people I know. One of the scary smart people I worked with quit because she felt that she wasn't getting enough done. We managed to convince her to come back one afternoon a week for the same pay so that other people could bounce ideas off of her. After a week of being stuck on a problem, I now knew enough to understand her answers. If someone had a design and she didn't see problems with it, they suddenly had enough confidence to move ahead and implement it. Obviously sometimes things still didn't work perfectly, but to the business it didn't matter. Far more projects were successful, and everyone else was so much more productive with that boost to their confidence. She could never have that boost, so was full of self-doubts, and she felt responsible/guilty when things didn't work perfectly. That they're so arrogant they have to victimize themselves for being smart. Be grateful for who you are, and that you have life and an opportunity for everlasting life. And use some cognitive therapy to snap out of depression and anxiety. While you're at it, say a prayer to your loving Heavenly Father. He can give you an endless supply of spiritual healing and strength to soothe your soul if you believe. The power of prayer, my friends. But thou must repent in order to receive thy Father's blessings. Pray for understanding to this in a gracious, comfort way, and may you receive the peace that only He can give us. Jesus is knocking at your door. Please answer it. His heart is pouring out for you to repent to Him, so He can give you a brand new born again life fueled by the Holy Spirit, filled with blessings from His good fruit bearing tree. Please pray for understanding to this and seek Jesus. Seek God. We are all his vessels whom he wants to glorify himself through. This means glory to you in a way you can't possibly imagine, but will be so great and awesome. To fear the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Pray for understanding, friends. Jesus is our judger of our souls. The only one who can perfectly in holy righteousness judge us for eternity. He knows your heart. You cannot hide one thing from him. Are you willing to gamble with your eternity? Pray for mercy and forgiveness and understanding, and live in repentance. Then forgive your neighbor, your friend, your enemy, your spouse, family member, and you shall also be forgiven by the Lord. The path to hell is wide and broad. The path to the heavenly kingdom is straight and narrow. Many will not enter the kingdom. Oh, how the truth will set you free. Do you have a relationship with him? Like you would a real person? Because he really truly does hear you. He is the one true living God. He is living all alive. Jesus Christ is alive amongst all of us. He is the light. Praise Yah. God bless you and your families. This'll get lost, but this thread is a pure gold mine of entertainment that I'll just throw my 0.02 inches point. You know, I don't think I've ever met someone that I didn't think was very smart in some way. Sure, someone can rub you the wrong way and you'll think, wow, what a dumbass. But actually have a conversation with someone and have them bring up something they are passionate about. I can talk to someone who sucks at something so obvious as computers/phones, but is really good with guns. Well, I don't know much about guns, so compared to me that person sounds pretty smart when they can take it all apart and explain it to me. Point. Or someone who gets lost when doing a puzzle, but is really creative and can draw well. I can't even draw a straight line, but listening to them talk about color theory is pretty fascinating. What about someone who's not a good worker, really frustrating to deal with socially, and doesn't think things through, but can rip apart an engine in a day? I couldn't even fathom being able to do something like that. Point. If someone can't figure out a 4th grade math equation, but can tell me the events on any day in history, is that person stupid by definition? I think, since everyone has things they are good at, any definition of smart is probably inherently wrong besides a few obvious outliers, Einstein, Hawking types. Maybe the closest you could get would be how quickly someone can learn something, but I'm sure there are problems with that too. So I think the sad truth is that a lot of people want to be better than everyone else, and pushing your flaws onto the arbitrary definition of smart is simply a coping mechanism to give yourself an excuse to never improve those flaws. I was told I was gifted my entire life. That's why I ended up alone. Doesn't help anyone, especially yourself. Truly think back and ask people around you, because I think we were all told we were smart. Point. I'd say, if you looked at this question and genuinely thought something along those lines, that you should seek some help and try to get a better perspective on the world. People expect me to be that different and some won't talk to me. Maybe that's because they were mean. But I've always felt different for not fitting in social situations, and there's different types of intelligence which people don't seem to know and acknowledge. I don't want to be treated different. I just want some friends. So for me personally, I haven't got the stimulation in school as I needed, and I think some people who are considered smart and logic, fast learners theoretical subjects don't need this, but I definitely did. And it ruined my life. The teachers didn't care, were disrespectful. I felt unseen, forgotten, and started as 12 cry every day I came home. I didn't have any friends. People stopped being my friend from age 11. So I wandered alone everywhere, cried on the toilets. And this was an ongoing thing for 6 years. Now I'm suicidal, and I have trauma with my family, friends, my old class. So that's the sad thing, and I don't really know if it had anything to do with me being smart. I mean, I needed to jump ahead some classes to stay simulated, which I didn't get to, but also people just treated me shitty. I think just cause I was complicated for needing more for my teachers and not liking same things as my classmates. My mom of course tried to do something, even so she didn't switch school for me. My mom is herself like this, and I guess I had high standards. Still have, and want to be like her, and be a scientist, especially in behavioral science. Now I've lost most respect for her when I've seen how she takes care of kids. Not at all. Point. My mom also always told me not to brag that I'm smart, which I find irritating cause I don't. Like I'm just talking about stuff and I never brag about it, so it made me talk less about the things I was interested in. I will start this by saying that IQ is not a concretely quantifiable thing. It is a score that represents placement on a bell curve of our best attempt at understanding what the notion of intelligence is in a meaningful, measurable way. The point I will be getting to requires a run through of what IQ means for it to not sound like completely irredeemable elitist bullshit. While the very first IQ tests were pretty much exercises in let's make white people look smart because white power, as time has progressed the understanding of what intelligence is, why it matters, and how it applies to how an individual is approached both from a psychological standpoint as well as an educational standpoint has become more firmly grounded in reality. So a large number, thousands, of people take an IQ test, and the test is normalized to those people who took the initial test. Since the bell curve is symmetrical, both the median average, the score attained by person who happens to land at exactly 50.00000% in the total sum of scores, and the mean average, the average of all scores attained put together, is 100. The standard deviation is 15 points, with standard deviation being vaguely explained as the average distance a person can be from the median and/or mean. 100 is 50th percentile, 85 is 15 points below, 115 is 15 points above. A score of 85 is roughly 16th percentile, or the lowest in a random group of 6 people. A score of 115 is 84th percentile, or the highest in a random group of 6 people. When we travel another standard deviation, we get to 70 and 130, roughly 2nd percentile and 98th percentile. 70 is the threshold for intellectually disabled, while 130 is the threshold for gifted. While IQ isn't an all-encompassing measure of the mind by any stretch of the imagination, being able to attain a certain score on an IQ test has certain practical ramifications. Somebody who scores low on the information section may not understand the nature of their current political situation in their own country to any meaningful extent. Somebody who does average on it understands their own political situation fairly well, but may not understand historic factors that play into the current state of things. Somebody who blows this section away will have a much more nuanced opinion on the politics of their world as it applies to them and others. Let's look at another section. Somebody that can only remember 4 digits forwards and 3 digits backwards when asked to repeat numbers back may have a little trouble with immediate memory, while somebody who can do 5 and 4 will be okay. Somebody who can do 7 and 6 can do some neat tricks and you don't want them to see your driver's license. There is a separate section focused on math problems in particular. Somebody who struggles with 3x24 and somebody who does basic compounding percentage math in their head successfully are going to be on another level with each other in that respect. So the point of all this bullshit, I explained all of this information because I'm now stating that significant differences in IQ are things that are readily noticeable between two individuals to some extent or other. If you have an IQ of 100 and somebody else has an IQ of 115, you are going to notice, hey, this person seems a little more swift just in general mentally. In the inverse, if you have an IQ of 100 and somebody else has an IQ of 85, you're going to notice, hey, this person seems like they're a little slow, not badly, but I notice it a bit. When we jump to a gap of 30 points, 130 is wow, this person is quite smart to a person at 100, and 70 is wow, this person may be in need of assistance. You just notice that differential from your own point of view. This differential isn't really some concrete thing and really only exists as a perception. I feel that this differential shifts with your IQ. If you have an IQ of 85, you're going to notice that a person with an IQ of 100 is a little more swift than you. They ain't hot shit, but you have no problem acknowledging they're a little brighter than you. If you at 85 see somebody at 115, you're probably going to think they're hot shit. Likewise, if you're at 85 and meet somebody with an IQ of 70, you're probably going to identify with them a bit more than somebody at or over 100 would. I scored 145 on an IQ test I wasn't expecting to take when I was 26. Personal issues that had led to depression resulted in a complete blindside with an Asperger's diagnosis the first time I met my psychologist. Applying the above to myself, I perceive 2/3 of the population as being at or below wow. This person is in need of assistance in terms of how I personally relate their intellectual capacity to my own. It's not that they disagree with me on something, it's that their disagreement doesn't show the depth or contemplation that my viewpoint has. Hell, I get even more irritated when it's somebody that disagree with me, but they are also lacking in the level of contemplation I have put into the subject myself. This isn't a perk. I hate this. I feel guilty about it constantly, and the only time I feel relief is when I'm in a room with a person that is more intelligent than myself, which would require a room with more than 740 random people in it before the probability of one of those people being more intelligent than me starts going up significantly. TLDR, people who cross the gifted threshold on IQ 130 perceive half the world as being markedly mentally slower than themselves. I don't call myself smart, but I'm pretty successful at a young age and people around me often label me as it. I genuinely spend more time trying to seem normal than I spend trying to learn things. I never ever try to come off as smart, because if people get a hint of anything remotely smart, they start trying to take you down, or prove you are some kind of idiot savant. People make up these fantasies about me, that I fail at everything, that isn't purely intellectual. If I can do this, then I must not have social skills right. Or I must never go outside right. Or if I know about computers I must not understand art at all right. Or I'll always be alone right. Even my own faking family does this. They treat me like I'm faking autistic, even though I have never shown any symptoms. I just remind them of the Big Bang Theory or some shit. What if I'm just a normal faking person that things come a little easier to? It faking sucks. I genuinely enjoy learning and digging deep into many topics, not as a virtue signal, not to be anyone or prove anything, it's just fun to me. But I can never ever talk to anyone about any books I read, music I like, what I think about movies, quotes that resonate with me because they think I'm trying to seem smart and start putting me down. Whenever I talk to literally anyone but my spouse, like my parent, coworkers, friends, I have to put on a fake personality that has much more boring interests and frankly a more empty personality than my real one. I was a gifted kid. Skipped the 2nd grade. Always in gifted pull-out classes. I was an avid reader as a child and had a large enough vocabulary that I often used words in conversation that even my own mother and siblings would mock me for. Very sarcastic comments from my mother and siblings, like, "You think you're so smart using all the big words," or "Quit trying to sound so smart." Dad had died, must have gotten my brains from him. And there were certainly no children around that I could converse with on that level. So, childhood was lonely. I read more, escaping into the stories of other people, which only furthered my isolation. Later, because we were dirt poor, teachers would make fun of my manner of dress. It didn't matter one bit that I was smart. I remember my middle school algebra teacher asking in front of the whole class why I wore the same Harley pants every day, and that it was gross. "Only pants I've got, lady." In the 9th grade, I had become so cynical, I dropped out of school. Screw all these people, I thought. My mother encouraged it because it would help her if I got a job and started paying rent. I homeschooled myself back before the interwebs, when it was correspondence school, and graduated in 6 months. Tested out of all of it, but I didn't to college. Had no support to guide me, and was of the mindset that very poor people did not go. No FAFSA back then, just Pell. Anyway, I did eventually go to college as an adult and I'm a successful infectious disease nurse today. It's the perfect profession for me, just took a while to get there. Though, I do still dream of astrophysics. Maybe in another life. All this to say, without support and proper guidance, giftedness can be a lonely place. You don't fit in with the adults, you don't fit in with the kids. You just don't fit anywhere for a while. Coming from someone who's always been considered bright, 4.3 GPA since freshman year, and who hangs around kids who have always been exceptionally bright, I'm still in high school. Here's a few things I noticed. Stress over everything. My girlfriend, F15, is easily one of the top 3 smartest people I've met. She's kept her GPA of 4.0. and above since middle school, and always knows the answer for every question. She's bright and caring, however, when one little thing goes wrong in her academic or social life, she starts crying from stress. It's sad to see how such bright people can just break down from stress, even though everything will seem fine to others. Expectations. What others think of us is what we try to be like every day. Obviously, parents hold a lot of expectations for us, so it's a constant struggle to try and live up to expectations. Doesn't get any easier. I've seen kids absolutely lose their minds when they didn't live up to others' expectations. Fear of failure. The most common thing. It's like we live with this shadow of failure living over us, just waiting to eat us up once we've done something wrong. Once I got a C+ on my final report card for math. I was terrified to go home with a C+ on my report card. So ultimately, I hid it from my parents. We are afraid to fail in everything, even if it's just the tiniest things that everyone else won't seem to bother about. To us, every detail matters, even the littlest ones. Depression. Most kids suffer from depression. Not surprised usually. Our depression stems from expectations. It's really sad. Didn't know this girl, however I knew she was really smart, but she accidentally committed sect. Drg overtse. It's extremely upsetting to see some of the smartest kids even lose their lives over this. Very young I was diagnosed with ADHD along with brilliance, which translates to being gifted. I was always first of class and usually completed math and tasks so fast I grew bored of them and was forced to do more work. For example, I would complete exams within a few minutes before the teacher finished explaining it to the class. I was always expected to get 95% plus every time I did anything. Eventually in high school, since I had never developed a technique to study, since I never needed to study before, I hit a wall. I'd covered not seeing friends and family for almost 2 years, online school, additional responsibilities, as well as constant pressure, and you get the perfect recipe for depression and failure in both my social life and school. I eventually went off the wall, only to find a bigger one I have yet to cross. Another problem linked to the education system is that I have to conform, and useless shit I've learned and understood 5 years ago, while the very few things I'm bad at are overlooked by teachers and result in me falling behind. We aren't evaluated on if we understand something, but if we conform and know something we'll forget in a few weeks, rather than useful abilities or basic critical thinking. The education system see people as numbers, and they lie and say they care about some irrelevant and outdated problems instead of looking at present problematics, so that people can't tell them they're the reason some people are depressed. Someone's parents just died? Don't care. You're expected to do your exam anyway or else you can't get into that uni program you wanted to go in. It's bullshit meant for everyone, starting with the most stupid people, to eventually get a job and get the economy running, not for individuals to thrive and grow. It won't probably be seen, but here is my story. Learned how to read/write and basic math by myself when I was around 3. My parents got bothered when I asked questions, so bought for me those books for kids and learned with them. Because of my curiosity I was emotionally neglected at home, and most of my teachers didn't like me because I wouldn't stop asking questions. When the grades came and the classmates compared with each other, mine were so much higher than the average. In primary school we had around 50 different grades and most of mine were A+, except music and phys ed, that they ended up ignoring me by 2nd grade and started getting bullied by 3rd grade. Meanwhile my parents pissed at my grades because they were not perfect. I stopped doing anything, to the point that in some classes in high school I was playing with the DS under the table and still managed to pass every class, except music, with high marks in a couple of topics that I liked. My parents divorced when I was in the last year of high school, and I used that as an excuse to drop out. Fast forward 10 years, I developed a somatoform disorder with some kind of personality disorder. Never went to therapy long enough to have it fully diagnosed. Lost mobility of the left leg under the knee for some time and now I have neuropathic pain and other symptoms associated with the disorder. Tried to start a degree in nautical engineering, bridge officer, but as I never learned how to study when the exams came I was clueless as how to work on the stuff that I didn't get just by asking, so ended dropping out. Now I'm completely trapped, trying to get papers for a disability and with a disorder that prevents me from creating any kind of meaningful emotional attachment point. Been going to therapy for over a year but doesn't seem to help either. I feel helpless and frustrated because I know that I can do more, but I accept that this is my reality now. So, TLDR, being smart in the wrong environment will ruin your faking life. Loneliness. I've spent the last 10 years trying to figure out if I've completely lost my mind, or if we are living an existence far worse than anything humanity has done in its past without having a clue we are doing it. The conclusion I've come to is that most people don't have the capacity to examine the system they participate in outside of the rules that define it. Without this capacity, we've funded and popularized a car culture which has been a global catastrophe on every level. Not the least of which, our complete reliance on the cheap and easy ability to move something around the world. The machines that make the chips in our phones and cars are manufactured from parts made all over the world by a single company. This company will fail to produce more machines as soon as it can't get a single critical part, which is how all systems, including ecosystems, break down. The more complex and distributed the system is, the more dependent it is on stability. We are living as a cancer on the world out of some rush to transition from horse-drawn plows to an intergalactic species in a single human lifetime, because we figured out how to parasitically exploit work done by life and the sun in the deep past, effectively cheating our way around the constraint of the solar year and ignoring the critical role of the carbon balance cycle concentration as the single most important regulator of life and climate as their effective point of intersection. The rush for each of us to see everything will end up showing us things we never wanted to see. I've personally witnessed the collapse of ecosystems that have been stable for as far back as records go. The silence that fills that space is so alien, it doesn't compute, and caused some sort of stress reaction. I'm still trying to figure out how to manage, though I'm hoping we all realize that silence in nature should trigger a panic response, because in our evolutionary past, such a silence would be an extreme selection pressure for avoidance, as it means that space is incompatible with life. And that's what it feels like when you experience it. Your body and brain scream, get out. Get out now. This is quietly spreading all over the world, and most of us are living in security to reality to notice it's happening around us too. When was the last time you had to stop to clean bugs off your windshield in the summer? When you commute, you're literally in a car driving toward a cliff, but there's no visible cliff on the road. The gas pedal is your food, clothes, medicine, lights, plane rides, heat for your home. But it's also increasing the speed you're heading towards the cliff, while also increasing the height of this cliff from the ground and the damage from the fall. Inside the car, you have your family and everything you care about, along with the entire ecosystem. The car is also traveling faster than it ever has, and has been steadily accelerating since the day you were born, so bailing isn't a comfortable option either. What do? What you are doing now is ignoring the cliff and hoping away any worry that this is your problem point as a species. The only response we have come up with is to make cliffs seem imaginary, exaggerated, or alarmist. We pretend that if all vehicles were electric, they don't still need tires, fluids, roads, and other consumables that come from petroleum, since half of the emissions of a vehicle are spent in its manufacture, at best. EVs have the same carbon footprint as a used car, but we act like changing to EVs would save the planet. We abuse hope as a default without taking any action to change the ultimate course of events. Hope should be the reward for change that leads to a positive outcome, not a means of manifesting wishes into an imaginary future reality while keeping the same course. The secret is our current and only plan for dealing with an increasingly empty and inhospitable world that could have sustained humanity, living as humans, indefinitely. Until money and oil aren't the same thing, there will never be any profit/motivation in doing what is necessary, only what makes us feel better, while continuing down the path over the cliff point. I hate it. TLDR, we are working to kill ourselves and the rest of the planet. The weather we are powering with the emissions each of us is responsible for will make our way of life impossible in short order, less than 10 years, and could happen very suddenly, possibly this year, and the effects of GHGs only amplify over time. Your breath takes 20 years to circle the earth and ascends to more consequential altitude slowly because of its density, in addition to the lag created by the oceans. Despite this, we have put in zero effort into planning for adapting to this inevitability. EVs are not a fix, because they still require roads, which require a smooth surface, which requires oil. That's how much we need to change / drop / abandon immediately, to avoid bearing witness to escalating tragedy, while trying to perpetuate the paradigm that bought and paid for said tragedy to begin with. For those that want to live differently and help work toward a livable future, there is no funding for developing a plan, because it amounts to anarchy in the face of the status quo. You also can't fix a climate / ecosystem that's already in free fall. You can only choose to acknowledge the truth and try to learn to adapt to it, or continue to live in ignorance until your reality becomes impossible, and make things up as you go from there. Either way, this way of life ends, because it was never a functional existence to begin with. Can't have a future when you're fueling growth by burning time. By 5th grade I was put into a gifted academy. I wasn't smart in the traditional math or science gifted, but I could argue like a nobody's business. In elementary school this got me into a lot of trouble, making it my goal to prove teachers wrong. I would consume information by the boatload and use it to my advantage. I didn't have a photographic memory, but I could retain information and apply it to my argument, like walking a chewing gun. I was an asshole. Everyone seemed slow around me, even adults and teachers. I would argue with strangers why they should stop smoking. My parents hated me. I would do everything I could to belittle them and make them feel as stupid as possible. I was a sociopath. At 11 I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wasn't going to let anyone get in my way, and I didn't care who I hurt to get what I wanted. The summer before 6th grade I was hit by a truck and was unconscious / in a coma for several days. That I suffered was catastrophic. I was told I would never walk or be able to communicate again. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me, other than the loss of IQ. I did regain my ability to walk and talk, although it took a lot of speech therapy, and I still struggle with a bit of a lisp. But now I have empathy, life has color, I can enjoy and appreciate art and music. I was able to find a wife, which looking back I don't think I ever would have found a woman to marry me the way I was. I used people, and if they didn't serve a purpose I discarded them. But now I find joy and life in serving and loving others. I'm a broker now, and a mediator / facilitator. I also do portraits and family photography on the side. Life is better since might be, but I occasionally wonder where I'd be if I never got in the accident. Intelligence is completely relative and quite hard, impossible, to fairly measure. Anyone taking an IQ test is going to score better if they had schooling that taught the same concepts vs someone else who didn't, but might score higher on a different test made by the people who designed the schooling, where they were taught point of course. A random person off the street might fail an advanced physics question compared to a nuclear scientist, but that person on the street might be able to fix 100 cars that the scientists can't even begin to diagnose. The sad part about intelligence is that the harder they try to quantify and measure it, the more people will score worse, because they just know different things. When we judge each other based on intelligence, we infer it from unfair things and make assumptions about them. Based on that point, colonizers everywhere for centuries claimed the indigenous people they massacred and enslaved were less intelligent to justify their abhorrent behavior. Intelligence is still used to keep power and high education from those who were unable to afford or access the education that would have helped the score higher in intelligence tests like the SATs and ACTs. In that regard, these tests are often more of a measurement of who could afford the most test prep classes and didn't have to spend time they could been studying working a job to help out at home. They become obsessed with a perfect image, then mentally and physically breaks when something goes wrong. Take it from me, I started school at a young age and started grades at a very young age. I was a year younger than other kids. I would learn and grow quickly from different subjects. I would be praised heavily for my work, and that praise brought me happiness. I was an overachiever at the age of 10, where in middle school I would be bullied by some of my peers for being smarter than most kids. I was taught that you shouldn't care what kids think, but you should care what the adults think. So I thrived on the praise and the approval from teachers, school staff, and other parents, even my own family. I became addicted to seeking praises and compliments. Then middle school started, and it became the worst experience of my life. I was still 10 when I started 6th grade and I struggled hard when it came to math, reading, but I excelled at history and science. I always got approval from history and science as it was mostly A's. My other subjects became low B's at best. I was then treated differently. Why aren't you studying enough? It's not that hard to do. You used to be a smart girl. Then other people started treated me differently. In 7th grade, I was moved to a different class because of the severe bullying I was facing in my regular English class. So I was moved to honors English and history became my third subject. I would often visit my crew class, the history class, to say hello, but I was treated with hostility for leaving them. I tried to explain, but the kids weren't having it. They specifically called me a traitor. So I had severe self-esteem issues and never grew up living a normal fun childhood. It was always schoolwork and my grades that matter. I kept taking advanced classes that were beyond my level. I kept stressing myself and overworking to the point I started almost mentally break myself. I'm what everyone tells me is smart, but it's more I just am curious. I know a lot of things because I like to learn stuff. My parents told me pretty much exclusively that I was smart, so I figured I didn't have to study. I was 5, so I didn't know how to study, but I also didn't get good grades because I honestly just didn't care. It got isolating because I saw people do well, but I just couldn't. Pair it with childhood abuse and I just wanted to disappear. I didn't think I'd make it to my 16th birthday. I'm 31 now, going on 32, but that trauma still cuts deep. I was diagnosed as a kid, but I wasn't allowed to keep my meds with me, and I was also the fat kid, so I got bullied. AD causes working memory problems, so they'd call me over the PA system, because it wouldn't get me bullied. So I eventually just refused to take medication. It was this year, 2022, when I learned about being twice exceptional. I probably was/am gifted and probably could have gotten incredible grades. But paired with both a learning disability, trauma, and just regular stuff kids do to other kids, whatever gifted parts of my brain got drowned out. So I'm exceedingly average. People at work are amazed at the facts I know. The owner was in awe when I explained what endemic meant. And our front-end team, holy shit, they were so impressed that I knew I wasn't the same person as William Hung. But I struggle to focus on tasks. I need written instructions or I forget processes, and I honestly have a massive superiority complex that I mostly keep to myself, save for a few global benevolent dictator jokes that are usually well received. Because I know I'm smarter than everyone I work with, and it frustrates me. I'm not in more control of how the company is organized, and that people actively talk down to me. It's lonely and confusing. My aunt says how much better it is to be smart than to not understand the world around you, but when you don't fit in for a lot of reasons, it doesn't feel that way. This is weird and rambly, so I hope I made a point at least. I think the saddest truth is that despite your intelligence, you're still largely a product of your brain chemistry. My dad is exceptionally intelligent. He has 2 master's degrees in engineering and could have easily gotten a PhD if he hadn't been busy with other things. He was involved with the creation of DARPANET and was a full bird colonel when he retired. He is extraordinarily well read on history and can remember almost any number combination given to him, going back nearly 70 years. He is able to apply his intelligence to a number of practical subjects, such as home maintenance and vehicle repair, though now that he's in his late 70s, it's more difficult. As well as theoretical subjects, he is a generally contented person who keeps himself company in large part. He is rarely lonely and goes through life with more of a sense of humor and wonder than anything. My mother was also exceptionally intelligent. She held a PhD in English and was a college professor. She wrote the original algorithm for evaluating student writing for standardized tests and was one of the leading people in the lawsuit that got Virginia universities to accept transfers from community colleges on a 1:1 credit basis. Her notes in her old textbooks show an active and perceptive mind with an easy ability to draw parallels between vastly different texts and their surrounding history/culture. She struggled with extreme depression, agoraphobia, and persistent imposter syndrome. She could be clingy because she got desperately lonely, but she also feared being an imposition and distanced herself. She felt isolated with almost everyone but my father, and didn't find peace until near the end of her life. Their measured IQs were probably comparable, though IQ has a ton of issues as a measurement, but on every general metric, these were two highly intelligent people. So why was one miserable for the majority of her life? Though based on family history from her surviving relatives, she didn't have a lot of outside factors to make her miserable, while the other has lived a generally happy life, despite things like growing up in poverty in a violent neighborhood, being in a war zone several times, losing the love of his life when she was only 45, and being left a single father to 2 children under the age of 8, one of whom was violent. My dad has a ton of reasons to be unhappy, but very rarely is. My mom had relatively few reasons to be unhappy, but most commonly was. And it's really all down to whose brain produced the right chemicals in the right amounts. No amount of intelligence or logic could make my mother happier, and no amount of intelligence or logic could change my father's cheerful viewpoint. And honestly, that has always scared me. There are enormous levels of neuroticism in gifted individuals these days. As if being highly intelligent wasn't enough of a struggle for certain individuals, they have to deal with a bleak outlook of the future and struggle to form bonds with people on account of it. Part of my work in former days included studying different groups of people and how they function in society. Another portion of that work revolved around how to be able to communicate with different groups of people and introduce a solid set of principles with which to overcome their plights. It was a largely successful endeavor, although it required plenty of trial and error, seeing as how I was doing this at a time when I was still growing and had my own difficulties to deal with. I saw people transform from reclusive individuals who fit a stereotypical profile of low self-esteem individuals with vast confidence problems to blossoming so completely that they discovered passions within themselves that ultimately changed the entire course of their lives. One of my finest examples is this incredibly intelligent individual who had an advanced grasp of strategy and human psychology. His plight stemmed from the fact that he was always an outsider looking in, so he got to witness all his peers undergo all the traditional milestones in their life, marriage, achievement, advancement, but never actually underwent that metamorphosis himself. It took years of actually working with this person and earning their trust that enabled my own quixotic/enigmatic influence to seep in. To make a long story short, this individual went from being the stereotype of the typical youth who has been taught to go to school and then to work and live a drab life, to completely reforming his life. He wound up dropping out of his original trajectory path, which was an MA in psychology. After a few more years under my wing, he wound up discovering his innate talent, which turned out to be music. Playing guitar to be specific. Once the seed had been planted, he nourished it himself when he graduated from an incredibly prestigious audio engineering school here in Los Angeles. Boy, that turned out to be a bit longer than expected. But yeah, he is one of my best examples of how tragic some gifted individual stories can be if there is no intervention on their behalf. Okay, I know this is going to sound ridiculously self-absorbed and narcissistic, but genuinely, being surrounded on every side by stupid people is incredibly difficult. I'm not, by any means, saying everyone but me is dumb. I know lots of very intelligent people, some of them far more intelligent than I, but the vast majority of people I know are faking idiots. I'm willing to admit I'm sometimes quite self-assured about my own smarts, and I get why that annoys people, but when I've been the smartest person in my school from the age of 5 until graduation, it's difficult not to feel a little superior sometimes. And yes, I know, I'm a dick, and yes, I know, everyone thinks I'm a personality black hole, but I genuinely don't care. I live in a rural area where school education isn't amazing, so I went about learning everything I could from home. The problem arises when nobody else does. It's made me into something of a control freak at times. I feel like I can't trust anyone to do anything without faking it up royally. Trying to do some tasks I find hilariously simple with other people is like trying to play video games with your 5-year-old cousin. You eventually just turn off the controller and let them think they're doing something great. Sometimes it genuinely does get really fucking shitty when absolutely nobody else understands you, or who you are, or what you do, and it's exhausting. Sometimes it feels like living in a society mostly made up of 5-year-olds and brain-dead simpletons. TLDR, I'm a narcissist in denial and people are fucking stupid. In my personal experience, I view the world differently from the average person, often with depressing views, especially the immediate world around me. People often say don't worry, everything is fine. This truly is annoying to me on another level, but that might be attributed to some form of behavior I either picked up or developed myself. When I think of the average person, I think of myself. Just pretty normal person with normal person problems. Wrong. I've seen the supposed dumbing down that I feel is really affecting everyone on this continent, North America. Sometimes people just need to literally open their eyes. We are constantly fed misinformation and oh well, that's always been and always will. But a huge portion of the public eye is just plain ignorance backed by arrogant views that we were fed in schools and taught by people with ideas. Always looking at this only one way, because that's the way world works. Just accept and go on about yourself. All this division, and whatever is stressful. Like it's seriously easier to just open an ear sometimes. I've been astounded by how some dumb people are so well versed, or very well informed about certain things, that even fly right over my own head. Personally, I feel it's better we just share views, as I'm always open to sharing my views with people who would at least listen for 15 seconds. I myself, sadly dropped out of high school due to constantly being told I could do the hard work, then being fed the lowest education possible that would grant me a flat C in yesterday's grading system. We are using numbers today for equity. Realistically speaking, it was depressing for me, as for some of the things I wanted to do. Being an academic student world made certain things simpler for me. There isn't much of a difference between applied and academic levels where I am. One is just more trade than practice. I've always wanted to do something I've enjoyed while taking up a practice point. As you can see, I have my own arrogant views about how the education we receive, and right now it's a bit too much to touch down on everything. I'm trying not to be the as that feels superior to everyone around me, because I myself don't believe in IQ measurements that just don't seem accurate. To me it just isn't accurate. Everyone is at their own level with different things, and that's awesome. I've seen a few situations where someone had trouble with maybe something basic like mapping slope on the x-y axis, but was absolutely extraordinary in other things. I kinda trailed off what I was saying, but yeah, I keep an open mind for people, because sometimes smart isn't even smart. It's just a perspective. I can't really cook, but I can spell, for instance. Education just itches me the wrong way, because people view me as dumb, because I didn't complete grade 10. But I know things. You know things. We all know things. Perspective. Everyone should take a second sometime and consider what it's like on the other side of the table. I was always so smart. A driven go-getter. I'm good at reading people. I can hold deep intellectual conversations about the universe. I can walk up to a random person and become their friend within 5 minutes. I've been on Dean's list every semester of college. I've never received an F in my life. I've created every opportunity I've ever had. I've taught myself to become successful. I correct the professor when they spill inaccurate information. This is much rarer, but has happened. I haven't dated in 6 years because I'm too busy working on my creative projects or studying. I'm fat because I don't work out, because I'm too busy studying or working on creative projects. I haven't made any friends despite my ability to make friends everywhere, because I'm too stressed to meet new people and care about them. I've lived my entire life with imposter syndrome, because I've never failed, and have an irrational fear of failure now. It feels like everything I do is a failure, and I had to seek therapy. Yet I approach therapy like an assignment, a planner with tasks to do to achieve feeling better. I'm often seen as an asshole that nobody wants to be friends with because I correct the professor or do my own work and passion projects. Yet everyone wants me on their team for group projects, to the point where one kid left class in a fit of annoyance when I said he'd rather work alone than in a group because I do all the group work. There's a lot of awful things about being smarter than everyone else around you. In fact, saying that phrase makes me seem like an asshole, but it's genuinely simply true. I may be in my early 20s, but I've been so far past my grades and schooling, along with the fact that I know and respect myself that it scares other people away. I'm a very social person. I'm loving. I'm caring. I'm empathetic. I want to know how your day is. But people like me are rare. I've never met someone in college who can have an intellectual, spiritual, or philosophical conversation with me. I've never met anyone that understands my passion to create. I've never met anyone who pursues knowledge like I do. I've never met anyone who can command a room like I can. I've never met someone like me, especially at my age group. I feel like I'm the only person like me, and I'll never meet someone that can understand me the way I understand myself, let alone meet a woman who would love me for that. I think I'm doomed to be the odd one out for the rest of my life. The way we define highly intelligent or smart is highly questionable to me. The typical way it's measured is based around speed of solving problems, and not necessarily the difficulty of the problems. IQ tests are based around small-scale rapid-fire logic problems, generally with known quantities instead of larger-scale more complex issues. The reality is success in life is always almost about solving long-term problems with infinite amounts of time to think about them, and not solving a bunch of short problems ASAP. Running a business is about making a best guess about a large pool of information, where you are dealing with 50% unknowns for every variable. It's psychology and large-scale probabilistic analysis. I don't think there is any correlation between intelligence and success beyond being about average IQ. To prove this, if you look at a list of Mensa geniuses, almost none of them have ever completed literally anything anyone cares about. The most well-known one I could find was only famous for born the wealthiest programmer I know, was a bottom of the bell curve programmer that decided to use his programming skills to make go gambling sites back when the idea was Neil Mayo. All the geniuses at Google don't make 100th what he pulled out. There's a lot of snark it, but honestly a lot of the high points are being hit. Isolation, social skills, expectations. XMAD is a very overgeneralized catch-all term. For example, I was always in every gifted or advanced placement class that my public schools had available. My parents chose not to enroll me into private academy, and while I typically scored in the upper 5-10% on all of my tests in every class, I was always getting failing grades every semester because the system grading ratio was homework/tests 60/40. So even if I was getting perfect 100s on my tests, my overall AVG grade was a 40/100ths. So here I was, the only kid in the county, for almost a decade straight, getting mostly F's across all of my classes, while also testing in the upper percentile. I spent years hearing from the teachers, "But you're so smart, why don't you just work a bit harder?" While him saying, "Why do I need to do the homework if I'm already acing the test?" Then my classmates are mostly just confused/perplexed, and plenty are jealous haters, and I can understand. Some of them were working their ass off on extra credit and I'm beating them on the test while failing the class at the same time. Every year I met with the principal and they agreed to promote me to the next grade level, because clearly holding me back was going to be a waste of time. Eventually they decided they didn't want to promote me all the way through high school, so I dropped out. Bottom line, yes, I've got a genius level IQ, but IQ as a holistic measurement of intelligence is a very flawed system. I read some interesting stuff about there being dozens of different kinds of intelligences, and this seems closer to reality imho, i.e. this is the core of the old adage about book smarts vs street smarts. Also, if it isn't obs already, my grammar is trash because I kinda don't give a f about it. So yeah, here I'm watched a G Hauser as a kid thinking fuck yeah I could be a doctor, but that shit was never going to happen for me. My parents and teachers had no fucking clue what to do with me, so instead I got a rough childhood, abusive home life, lots of fights, all kinds of bullshit drama, and so on. Now 40+-year-old, I feel like a pretty well-rounded individual. I've been a big student of philosophy for the last decade or so, and for the rest of my life at this rate. But even though I'm unfortunately often the smartest person in the room, it has not necessarily made my life any easier. Not necessarily the opposite though, just decidedly different. I rarely find anyone in person who I can look up to as a mentor/guide. Thankfully though these days we have the internet, so I spend the majority of my time searching out for PPL who are clearly more knowledgeable than I'm on whatever's thing I'm curious about. ATM really hard to sum up a lived experience in just a few short paragraphs, but thanks to this modern technology I know that, while my experiences are unique, there are thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, of PPL who had similar experiences. This is still a super minority even on a national scale and just a speck on a global scale, but still it's something. TLDR, I wouldn't trade my lived experience for anything, and being smart/intelligent has certainly been a blessing but it has also come with its fair share of difficulties as well, and unfortunately one of those difficulties is in trying to explain what it's like to someone else. I have been considered smart ever since I was little. I don't agree with that label, but I can see it in people's actions towards me, and one of the sad ones is definitely the delegation of a high number of difficult tasks. Whenever I have to work in a group project the tough part comes to me naturally, so I end up pretty exhausted most of the time. I never had serious issues with expectations, because I'm quite harsh on myself, and my own expectations are usually higher than other people's. But my mum's pressure for my success gets in the way sometimes. Last year I had to tell her I could fail at a subject in uni and what I heard from her was, "You can't. That's for regular people and you're not one." This can be maddening. Another thing I can mention is the whole persona of a genius you end up having in other people's judgment of you and your possible adherence to it. Their building of my image as an Albert Einstein who walks among mere normal people had its toll on me last year, and I changed my attitude to a more closed off person. I also left most of social media and still haven't come back properly. Now whenever I meet people I realize I'm completely okay with them not knowing who I'm. So I'd say the worst part of being deemed intelligent is the image you have and people's perspectives and all that comes with that. I found I wish people didn't know me well at all. That it doesn't really matter how smart you are, if people just decide to hate you or do bad things, that's kinda just it. No matter how hard you try, there's no talking people out of that kind of mentality. Also add in all the mental issues like depression, anxiety, perfectionism and others, it's not as fun as you'd think. People say I'm smart and stuff and really not. I just like to read and learn new things sometimes, but I might as well say my piece. Still though, I think I'd take knowing all the cool shit I know and actually being able to see the true beauty in some things, even if it's not something I will or can ever fully understand myself. Math sucks, over just living that boring life of everyone else that makes the same goddamn helicopter joke and mocks people that cut or struggle with mental illness and says racist shit they think isn't and is just telling the truth. But it still is. Still though, that's just my personal view on it. I know a lot of people that had trade all the smarts in the world just to be normal and happy, and I fully understand that, no judgment. Hell, some days I feel like that too, especially when I was younger and just getting hit with the world's most dangerous toxic cocktail of mental issues, depression plus anxiety plus trauma and abuse. Yeah, wasn't a very fun time for 11 to 14-year-old me. But somehow I eventually got better. Still not sure how, definitely couldn't have done it without my group of supportive and loving friends that I now think of as family, and some amazing though very expensive meds that keep the bad thoughts at bay. That being smart isn't special. Lots of people glom onto I'm smart as a coping mechanism in junior high or high school when everybody's a big ball of insecurity looking for something to pin their self-esteem on. But being smart just isn't that special. Whatever the average IQ is, guess what? Half of everybody is at that IQ or higher. Above average or gifted doesn't mean much. And being knowledgeable is even less special. If I know something about history, science, or literature, and another person doesn't, the only difference between us is that I was exposed to the fact somehow and remembered it, but they weren't. It doesn't make me a better or higher status person if I learned about the defenestrations of Prague from a Wikipedia article and you didn't. All it means is that I read a Wikipedia article. And when it comes to actual success in life, discipline and social skills are about 1,000 times more effective than intelligence. In the end, average intelligence will leave genius in the dust if the average guy has discipline and social skills and the genius doesn't. But there's this whole cottage industry of IQ self-testing, internet subculture of high IQ kids So many people fall prey to attaching their self-esteem to being smart and hang to that like a life preserver, rather than trying to make a swim at life. There's too dang much to unpack here to answer the question. I've seen posts about a smart person's potential, the expectations that others express they have/had for that smart person, often when they were a child/teen, the burdensomeness of those expectations being placed on one's shoulders, much of with which I identify. What I've never understood is, how does anyone know how smart I am? I didn't read independently exceptionally early, picture books at 5 or 6, though I've enjoyed reading from the start. I don't recall being tested for an IQ level, and if I was, it was not told to me, even when I was older. I usually got decent grades, but not exceptionally so. In junior high and high school, I made the honor roll maybe 70 or 75% of the time, never highest honors, and high honors maybe 20% of the time I made the honor roll, the other 80% was basic honors. We had standardized tests called our basics every few years in school. I usually scored in the 90-something percentile in English, and 60 through 80-something percentile in math. I don't remember much else about them. I did have 6 school teachers in my family when I was a kid, and they all knew my teachers, even the 3 relatives who taught in the neighboring school district, so I guess they talked on occasion, and I suppose info was shared. Some people have commented on my vocabulary being advanced, maybe, but I just use words that I know, and I don't strive to use big fancy words. But how does anyone know? Intelligence/book smarts is only one aspect of a person, and I'm not convinced that it's the most important aspect of a person. My IQ might be a bit above average, but my emotional intelligence quotient, and social intelligence quotient, if that's a thing, leave a lot to be desired. Always have. Finally, being smart doesn't insulate one from making dumb choices. I just try to get by as peacefully as I can, and because of, but you're so smart/intelligent, you have such potential, if only you just try. Peaceful living is apparently not good enough, so I'm seen as a failure. Fine. Leave me alone, then, so I can have some peace and quiet. I was reading a Malcolm Gladwell book last year. In one chapter, he introduces a common IQ test. The test he describes goes through a series of increasingly complex and abstract image-based patterns. Each question asks you to examine the start of a pattern and select the correct next image from a multiple choice list. It's fairly straightforward. The more you get right, the higher your IQ, and as you proceed through the questions, they get harder. He printed the first question, the easiest, in the book, followed by the last one, the hardest. Staring at the hardest for a minute or so, I put my brain into overdrive. I've always thought of myself as a smart person. As a kid, my IQ was tested for a gifted program. I scored so high on it that they told my parents I had cheated and forced me to retake an oral version. This little book anecdote felt like a challenge to prove I wasn't just lucky, I was good. After working the question around at what really did feel like my mental limit, I came to what I thought was the answer. Turning the page, I was delighted for a moment to see the answer I selected staring me in the face, but I got my hopes up too quickly. Paraphrasing, Gladwell wrote, "Did you get it? Me neither." He assumes that no normal person, including himself in that bucket, would be able to identify the pattern. He then proceeds to rattle off a massive list of positive traits not associated with intelligence, and why the reader should feel good about not knowing the answer. Everything from happiness, actually negatively correlated, to likelihood of relationship satisfaction. It was one of the hardest slaps in the face I've ever experienced. Being smart may have a lot of nice perks, but for the things that really seem to matter in life, if anything, intelligence is nearly a handicap. I've been fortunate to have the social skills to navigate life pretty well, but there are times where there's something lonely about my interactions. Not that Gladwell is a rocket scientist, but when even public intellectuals put you in the out there bucket, it feels crappy. Smart people can still be dumb, just in a different way to most people. There are also many people who think of themselves as smart, though it's very human. that everyone overestimates their own intelligence, mostly because they are aware of their own thoughts and motives and simply think others are not like them. Most of it tracks back to an inflated ego. For example, there are smart people who think they are done thinking about or through something. They are convinced they reached at some fundamental truth and refuse to even consider they could be wrong. They can also be quite contrarian and in a need to elevate themselves above others, since they see most people as less smart than them. To say it politely, they will think that the wisdom of the masses must obviously be flawed, and that ideas or positions that have been dismissed by most may be worth a second look, since most people just don't get it. That's also why communism and such is so attractive in academia, because they feel like they are the ones who get it, the ones who solve this puzzle, the ones who think that it would work if they could implement their version of it. To quote Thomas Sowell, socialism in general has a record of failure so blatant that only an intellectual could ignore or evade it. Also, reading things like his vision of the anointed really shows how some people, who at least think themselves are smarter, so they champion causes, and people that are just misunderstood by the common people who just don't get it, unlike them. Coupled with the above, there is also a trend of confusing eloquence and the use of fancy sounding words with intelligence. So they will defend their ideas / positions / opinions with fancy words that most people won't use in everyday conversation, and then take others' inability to properly answer as proof of them being right. If someone cannot even understand their specialized terminology, then they obviously aren't smart enough and their arguments or attempts at debunking you cannot be correct. I claim to be smart. Aha. I'm still crippled with the pressure of needing to implement grandiose greatness, even though living a mediocre life would be just fine. I just want to smoke weed and play. If you think you're so smart, then figure it out. I did my own cognitive behavior therapy and immersion therapy to get rid of abusive childhood issues. Started that at 16. Started educating myself at 15. Taught myself how to be successful, social and exceptionally humorous, not at the expense of others. Figured out, refined and corrected multiple ascetic techniques from various traditions. Experienced enlightenment temporarily at 17. Still working on that specific technique as it was purely physiology based. Figured out the rest of asceticism. Unfortunately, a lot of traditions are just doing what those did before them, even when it's incorrect. Spend my time constructing solutions and devising working models for various things. Love finding niche unconventional exploits. Seriously love this one. BF physiology based, chemistry, both, business etc. Taught myself how to learn everything. Devised effective models for learning anything effectively and quickly. Raised my brother and sister and helped them become well-rounded. Recently created a working business model that will put more money in employees' pockets and allow them to live like a baller with plenty of money while increasing employee retention dramatically because of that simple fact, while still making a hefty profit and retaining business stability. All without changing any laws or doing anything shady etc. More etc. Your ideas are worthless unless you can serve them on a silver platter. Expected. People respect your ideas more if they pay for them. Most people have no idea what they are doing. Everyone's desperate to have anxiety, and I can get over it, but it's dangerous to do so because it's all or none with me. One delusion or the other. I want to do everything, all of it, and I know how, but it takes effort, momentum that I have not put in the effort to get. Plus I am getting older and spent half my life figuring it all out. I would be content just smoking weed and having fun, but I'm broke and still want to do so much. I feel like I need to become great. If not me, then who? I don't mean sort of great. I mean grandiose great. If I don't, everything I put effort into figuring out will die with me, from small to big. Plus I succeeded where so many failed, and I have yet to succeed where so many have already square-brained themselves into succeeding. Conclusion. I'm isolated, living in a hotel with a good price. Work one 48-hour shift a week and make 19 an hour. All of my own doing. I just wish I could have some help doing anything at all ever. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to do some things. To be honest, if I'm smart enough, why don't I figure it out? How? I suppose more than anything, it's knowing the only help worth having is hired help, and at this moment I'm on the poor side. As for every other smart person, the tragedy is knowing they often stop too soon. They stop increasing their intelligence, or they become so specialized into a single niche that they become dumb about everything else. They never learn to learn. Most stop whenever whatever pressure being applied to them lets up. Few feel the need, the pull to keep going. And look at me, 33 and poor. I may know an exceptional amount, and it will take exceptional effort to become financially successful and implement my unconventional business plan. So then I can funnel personal funds into promoting other unconventional things into the world. However, fuck man, I'm lazy. And then there's the saddest part. Because of my successful background in aesthetics, I've devised a working model to manipulate my own physiology ritualistic style to easily overcome laziness and produce tangible emotional motivation regularly, to increase dopamine and oxytocin and lessen internal emotional resistance. I'm just avoiding doing it. And yes, I can explain how that all works in medical terms. The full physiological functioning of how and why. Exploits me man, exploits blah blah blah, right? Even gotta devise a way to adequately relax and recuperate sufficiently, because what I desire will take me going balls to the fucking wall. It will result in inevitable CNS burnout again, unless I do so. Beware conditioning people. And so, being smart is tragic. If you can ride the wake of a smart person, do so. If you can exploit one, do so. Most won't pull themselves by their bootstraps enough to succeed. And the reality is you can square brain yourself through most of life successfully, because the majority of people are doing just that. Lol. Point. At one point I shared absolutely everything I learned, exploit and all, with people. Devised a way I meet hundreds of women easily, which honestly is just one side to a indiscriminate hyper networking method I made. But if you want to meet a lot of women, it works perfectly. Told a few people. Most either don't think it works or are too afraid to try. It works swimmingly. Point. Used to share everything, all of it. Most people are just tourists. Those seeking spirituality don't want it, they just want something to believe in. Most people just want a job, not wealth. Most people don't know what to do with one woman, let alone many. I told my brother the best form of vasectomy to get: festival side open, abdominal cauterized, with a fascia interposition. He still just got the snip and clip. See my point? Having solutions isn't enough. Being smart isn't enough. Being smart isn't enough. You have to have power to herd the sheep. People want to follow. They just don't want to follow you. Because why should they? What have you done? What have you done for me lately? Eddie Murphy. Point. I literally had a physiologist tell me in another sub it's hilarious how smart you think you are and how uninformed you think everyone else is, simply because I shared an exploit on releasing endorphins and said compounded effect, doing many things that help in similar ways, would help with postpartum depression. I just wanted to share my backdoor to a powerful endorphin release, seeing as most people mistake dopamine and oxytocin release for endorphins. Endorphins are only released via pain and adequate physical stress. Well, and I'll share. 2 tablespoons cayenne pepper diluted in 500 ml water bottle. Shake and sip. Always shake, always sip. Continuously sip, and within 5 to 10 minutes your body will be flooded with endorphins. Why? Because capsaicin, the chemical we call spicy, is interpreted by the body as pain. Diluting it in water makes it seem less spicy, but effective, spreads it around the mouth and esophagus, greater surface area exposure than when normally eaten. Done in this way you'll get a better endorphin release than most people have ever felt. I also explained to him how to get better endorphin release from exercise. Oh but no, apparently I'm the asshole here, because I shared some sheet. Okay, I'm done. Thank you all for listening. And wish me luck on becoming filthy rich and practically sugar daddying all my employees effectively. It's going to take a great deal of effort to get started. More than I want to think about. I was that smart kid all the way from kindergarten to year 7. The reality was, I wasn't smart at all. I was just forced to study my ass off and remember some formulas which I wouldn't use at all in high school. It really destroyed my childhood cause I wasn't allowed to have social interactions outside of school apart from birthday parties, and as a result I spent many school lunch times depressed and lonely. I also sucked at writing essays and public speaking, Couldn't do it for sheet unless someone else wrote the speech for me. My English grades have suffered throughout my life cause I lack the creativity that others have, probably due to my sheet social life. I also didn't do sports until I started high school, and until then I was extremely skinny, possibly anorexic, and my parents just brushed it off as just average for our culture. I'm still skinny now but definitely in much better shape than I was 4 years ago, and people see me not as a weak person. Also, when I realized that I was my own entity a few years ago, something happened. My grades dropped, but I became a much better person for some reason. I got a hobby that I actually enjoy, playing guitar, and I got a bunch of friends that I love to death, and my social skills, although still bad, improved drastically. I also stopped being a dick to select people just because they were assholes to me, and that also made me a lot happier. I suddenly couldn't stand being a dick, but I liked it. My grades, though my math grades were stellar until year 8, then my study habits went to shit, and I spent most of my time on hobbies. I tried to determine myself to study, yet I got distracted every time, even as I'm writing this. I've been trying to fix this problem, but it hasn't been working. At this point I don't even know if I want to do an engineering course in uni and get a job in it. I wanna go in the path of music, which I have been studying at school, but my parents don't, and probably won't ever, support me in it. Another issue I have is when someone comes up to me thinking I'm actually smart and realizing I'm just as useless as them and cannot work out the answer whatsoever. Trust me, I love helping people and am willing to help someone anytime, but when people give up on me because I can't solve their problem, it saddens me. I'd rather they don't ask me for help than having them ask me and me not being able to help. By the way, these are just my experiences. I'm sure not everyone is like this. Holy crap, I just realized I've written a huge text wall. Sorry for that. Point TLDR, my parents forced me to study a lot, and as a result, my whole childhood was ruined. And also many, not all, smart people are actually extremely dumb. Growing up I knew I was different since nobody seemed good to understand how I felt and how I perceive this world and politics and everything. Basically like ideology. Smart means they know truth, and sometimes truth aren't prettiest. Sometimes the informations you have is too much for them to handle. More I learned about history and laws and ideology and the way another people has different ideas of philosophy. It was awful for me because I was always told to let in other people to learn, and I felt like my teachers was basically repeating because I was too smart, to the point I just studied things before my class even learned. When I was younger for fun, my favorite story, I was in maybe 9th grade and a teacher demanded that I pay attention to her when I wasn't, and tried to test me by asking what did she talked about, and I saw a word chlorophyll on a PowerPoint slide. And I went on about how chlorophyll is form of cell which produces pigment of plants and takes a huge role in climate change by greenhouse gas production, and many more which I won't be stating here, as you might ask why smart people can't shut themselves up. They're like a leaking container. They have so much information which they would like to share in very specific details, and their word use and their description style might be slightly different. I talked too much. I always knew what to do and everyone felt like it was easy to just depend on me, and I was constantly being in trouble for being depended upon. And unfortunately people with higher intelligence unfortunately is commonly found to have some of mental disorders, which makes their social life slightly more difficult compared to others. Fertility rate is much lower due to self-sufficiency in old age, and that we can see the planet is unable to support humans above 3 billion. Countries with many smart people and positive economies see fertility rates drop under replacement, like Canada and Norway. This limits innovation and scientific advancement, and the only thing that will help smart wealthy people have more children than poor or stupid people is reverse income tax and a global government to provide stability for the poor or stupid, so they don't need to overcompensate with children. Capitalism is the heel on the neck of human advancement, and wealthy people are the foot in that boot. Wealthy people do not want reverse income tax because they don't care about the betterment of humanity. In order to increase the fertility rate in the smart is to reduce the population pressure on the planet from the poor or dumb. We understand that we would hurt the planet and all other humans by contributing to the population. Until the human population falls under 3 billion, smart people will continue to extinguish their lines because they actually care. Humans will not advance until population drops enough to encourage the smart to breed, and that will not happen until capitalism is over and we have a single planetary government. That will not happen, ever, without outside influence. That is the sad truth about humankind, not just smart people. We are done. In the general sense, if you're above high school education, you're probably already one of them, and not realize it. The sad truth about it is being smart doesn't mean you know a whole lot of life practical information or important information regarding practices for things like law, government, politics, mechanical, etc. Most people are just skilled, which means they are overly good at one thing, to compensate for a lot of people that are far from independent, including people like themselves. Essentially, being smart is not special or all that useful, it's just a personal choice people make, and people try to bring up as a quality, when it's honestly not. It's just a trade-off for, generally, being really useless with their hands on basic activities. If you mean geniuses, the sad truth is that anyone can be a genius, but the educational system is not designed to help people get there, so the only people that typically become geniuses are people with some type of mental disposition. This means that one autistic kid is probably really good at robotic things and are hyper-focused in math, but are useless at the simplest tasks within English because it has rules that are more abstract than real. The pattern recognition is far more complex and random. For example, a lot of people, because of this, will master something they might not even like because it's how they're wired. Some will say they like it because they're raised to dread failure and this was the only subject that didn't bring these negative feelings up. Also, intelligence level is correlated with depression. Not surprised. It's hard to try and socialize with people below your mental threshold. You also understand too well why certain things are faked.